Your City Council meeting for October 11th, 2022. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez, not yet present. Councilmember Friedman.
Here.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Here.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
And Mayor Rouse.
Here. And I believe we have a ceremonial item. Read that, please.
Item 1, Fire Prevention Week, October 9th through 15th, 2022.
Hello.
We can't forget Sparky now, can we? The guest of honor is here. This is Fire Prevention Week from October 9th to October 15th, 2022. Whereas the City of Santa Barbara Fire Department is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our city, and whereas the City of Santa Barbara Fire Department is aware that homes are where people are at the greatest risk of fire, and is therefore dedicated to reducing home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas smoke alarms, which may sense smoke well before people can, cut the risk of dying in a reported home fire by 50% by alerting occupants of danger when they may have as little as 2 minutes to escape safely. And whereas it is important that smoke and carbon monoxide alarms meet all the needs of family members, including those with sensory or physical disabilities, and that everyone in the home understands how to respond to the alarms. And whereas those who have practiced a home fire escape plan are more likely to survive a fire because they are more prepared in such an emergency. And whereas the 2022 Fire Prevention Week theme, Fire Won't Wait, Plan Your Escape, effectively serves to remind the City of Santa Barbara community that it's important to have a home fire escape plan. Now, therefore, I, Randy Rouse, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of the City of Santa Barbara, do hereby proclaim October 9 through 15, 2022 as Fire Prevention Week. I urge every community member to create and practice a home fire escape plan and to support many of the public safety activities and efforts of the Santa Barbara Fire Department and Office of Emergency Services. Well done. Sparky. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Mayor Rouse, members of council, thank you. I'm joined here at the podium by Fire Marshal Ryan DiGiulio, with Public Outreach Coordinator Liliana Encinas, and Sparky. Sparky has been a huge hit this week. Sparky has been visiting all of the elementary schools, including Monroe. Got to go see Monroe School, and what an impact Sparky has at the elementary schools. It was really great to see. Also joined in the audience with several department members, have the engine and truck crew from Station 1. Division Chief Brian Fetterman is here. Battalion Chief Robert Mercado is here. Our department is 107 members, and all of us, every single one of us, is focused on fire prevention. From the line firefighters who go out on a daily basis and do building inspections, do pre-plans, check their areas, monitor their areas, to our vegetation management personnel that are out creating defensible space in the high fire hazard areas, to our entire fire prevention division who spends every waking hour of their day on fire prevention. So we take it very serious. We don't want to go to fires because really something's gone wrong when there's a fire. And so it's our job to protect this vital community and this community we all love to the best of our ability. So thank you for the proclamation. I'm going to have Fire Marshal DiGiulio say a couple of things along with Liliana. Sparky will remain silent today, but he is here in spirit.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay. Mayor Rouse, City Council members, thank you for the proclamation. It's an important year this year. This is actually the 100th anniversary of National Fire Prevention Week. This stemmed from the Great Chicago Fire, and years after that, the nation said, what are we going to do about this issue and this problem? So 100 years ago, they decided to make, the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, decided to make Fire Prevention Week. It's a vast resource, and that's what I want to tell the community, that unfortunately we're not immune to wildland fires, natural disasters in our community. And that's kind of mindset that a lot of our citizens have here, but there's a ton of efforts you can do on a day-to-day basis with your family members, with your roommates, with your building mates, with your neighbors. And that's kind of the message we're trying to get across today. We've been doing that obviously with Sparky at the elementary school age, but we're lucky enough to have Liliana on a vast public outreach program, and I really want to encourage the citizens to dive into those programs. And what does it mean to check my smoke detector? What does it mean to use a fire extinguisher properly? How do I plan an escape for my family if something were to happen? Because the risk is always there. It's not just massive events. So that's what we want the community to know, that you can get a hold of us anytime, and we're more than happy to help our community get more fire wise and really utilize this Fire Prevention Week to supply the tools that our citizens need to keep them and their families more safe. So with that, Liliana, would you like to say a few words?
Ms. Encinas.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, Chief Marshall, thank you. I'm just very pleased to be able to work with the community and do all of our messaging bilingually, Spanish and English, reaching out to all of our families, all our familias out there, and really starting the safety, the planning, everything at home. Because if we're ready at home, then we can be ready to respond to any major disaster too. And so just want to thank you for the time.
All right, thank you. I can't wait to see what the other departments come up with for mascots. This will be great. Okay, Madam Administrator, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mayor Rouse.
Okay, then we will move to public comment. This is for items not on the agenda. Anything within the purview of this body, a limit of 3 minutes, please. Kitty Christian is the first speaker. And you have 3 minutes at the podium. Please, there's a little timer right there on the podium for you.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Kitty Kristen, and I'm here today to ask for your help in encouraging Santa Barbara Airport to be a good neighbor to the residents of Goleta. My husband and I moved to Rancho Goleta Mobile Home Park 17 years ago. We love the quiet community, and being lucky enough to have a property on the lake, we enjoy being outside with the wildlife and the atmosphere that we have there. That was until Southwest Airlines moved in with their larger, older planes that are extremely loud. And then with the pandemic ending, we have a lot more commercial flights coming and going out of SBA. Now, I don't mind pausing a conversation or a movie once in a while as a plane flies nearby. But this is happening numerous times throughout the day and night. And it's not only commercial jets, but the corporate jets are making a lot of noise too. Some of them can be almost as loud, if not louder, than the commercial flights. And this leads me to some other concerns about pollution and safety in the area. I, as well as many of my neighbors, are seeing black gunk on our outdoor furniture, plants, and vehicles, on our homes. And so this brings a lot of concerns about what we are breathing in the area. And, I think a lot of that also comes from the private planes that are flying in the area. Another safety concern I have is in the last year, and maybe not even quite a year, I have seen at least 4 to 5 commercial planes do go-arounds. That means they are coming in for a landing. They are less than a mile from the airport. I hear that engine hit full speed throttle, and they're off again, coming around again in about 10 minutes for a landing. I've talked to commercial pilots that I know. This is not normal. It's not something airlines want to do. It's not something pilots want to do. It's very expensive. So it just kind of makes me wonder about the safety of what's going on at the airport with all the traffic there. why is this number of airplanes being asked to go around? I've never seen that before. Please know that for the most part, I love living near SBA. I knew what I was getting into when I moved there. Moving is not an option for us. I love seeing the planes come and go for the most part. I used to fly small planes. A lot of times out in my yard, as the planes come in, I wave to the people and welcome them, say goodbye. Kind of nerdy, I know, but I enjoy that. So again, what I'm asking is just that SBA be a good neighbor, keep us in mind with their expansion, and for your help in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Cecilia Fabulich, I think.
Yep.
Is that good? No, very good.
Thank you. I represent Clean and Quiet SBA. There are 33,000 residents in Goleta, and we're all affected by the amount of noise that's coming from the airport. We are asking for an independent noise study that entails the entire community, not just around the runways and the people that are working at the airport. We're asking for an updated environmental impact report that covers the whole community. The amount of traffic that has increased since June is enough. Our residents are smelling aircraft fuel. I mean, that's really bad news. I mean, we're getting more and more concerned about expansion. The airport is having growing pains, and somebody has to be there to tell them when to quit. We can't tolerate an increase in scheduled flights, and yet they have these plans for expansion, and no one has convinced me yet that they don't intend to increase the flight schedules if it's possible. You've got to know that the people in Goleta are really worried about this, but they're not the only ones that are concerned. We hear complaints from Moore Mesa, The Mesa, Hope Ranch, and other people that live in Santa Barbara, mainly the ones that live under the aircraft flight paths. But what I'm noticing is that the flight paths are, sometimes the pilots will vary off the flight path in order to make it quicker to the airport to save fuel and to save on-time scheduling, which is something that affects their paychecks. If they can cut across my house and save a little bit of time off their schedule, it's a good thing for them and their carrier, but it's a bad thing for us. Santa Barbara has a noise ordinance. I want to know why you folks can't include aircraft to your noise ordinance. Long Beach prosecutes frequent violators to their noise ordinance, and aircraft are included. Yeah, I've emailed the FAA, and they tell me that there's a grandfathered clause that doesn't permit us to have a curfew, but you folks can make aircraft noise part of the noise ordinance. It doesn't have to fall under one purview. The other thing we're asking is that you do what Long Beach does, which is prosecute the violators. We're asking for stiffer penalties for people that violate the aircraft flight path. We're asking that noise be included on the agenda.
I need you to wrap up, please.
Okay, what can you do to get noise on your agenda? It is an issue between your city and my city. Thank you.
Thank you. Ernest Solomon.
Stick with me, the old gray stallion ain't what he used to be.
I haven't started your 3 minutes yet, so you're good.
I've lived here for 53 years, by the way. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, I've written several letters to you concerning diesel soot spewed into our air by every cruise ship that you anchor off of our shore, sometimes 2 in 2 days. The health dangers of the particulate matter in our air, known as PM.5, gets worse every time a cruise ship anchors here. The only council member who I received a reply from was Councilwoman Sneddon, the only one of you who was smart enough to vote against the visits of cancer-spewing cruise ship. She gets it. Diesel engines emit a complex mixture of pollutants, including very small carbon particles, or soot, coated with numerous organic compounds known as diesel particulate matter. Diesel exhaust also contains more than 40 cancer-causing substances. In 1998, California identified diesel particulate matter as a toxic air contaminant, as have federal government agencies and the World Health Organization. Diesel engine emissions continue to contribute to numerous health impacts, increased hospital admissions, particularly for heart disease, but also for respiratory illnesses and even premature death. Several factors exacerbate the health risks of diesel soot exposure. Diesel particulate matter contains compounds known to damage DNA and cause cancer. Diesel particulate matter pollution can affect the environment. Diesel soot is a potent contributor to global warming. These ships have nothing but a negative impact on our city, except they deliver cash to the coffers of our city and some of the merchants. These soot-spewing cruise ship visits must be canceled. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody online waiting to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have Mike Glick. Mike Glick, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm calling about the Santa Barbara Airport impacts to the Elwood area in the West Goleta. Currently, the Santa Barbara Airport and the Santa Barbara City Council is doing effectively nothing to mitigate the noise, pollution, and safety risks over Elwood. And I'll bet you don't even know that there's a, quote, noise abatement corridor to the west of the airport where the planes are supposed to bank out over the bluffs and the ocean before they get to Elwood, similar how they do to the east of the airport. They bank out over Moore Mesa to avoid Hope Ranch. And I'm quite sure that none of you know that even exists, but it's there, it's been there for many decades. It predates 1990. But it's not being enforced at all. There's no enforcement of it. So you guys need to immediately get that back on the charts and start enforcing that, because you guys are flying out near midnight, and then around 5:15, you've got a regularly scheduled flight at 5:15 every single morning, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You cannot possibly think that's acceptable. And you need to get a curfew going. The curfew always was 10 p.m. till 8 a.m. Okay, this stuff's all grandfathered in. Don't say you can't do it. You need to start doing it now. And this needs to be on the agenda every single meeting until you mitigate this. If you guys want the money, you have to do the work. Mitigate the impacts, please. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, are there further speakers?
No, Mr. Mayor, no further speakers.
Okay, very good. With that, we'll close public comment. We'll go to the consent calendar. Do we have some items to read?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 3, 2022 through 2025 Firefighters Association Bargaining Unit Memorandum of Understanding, Ordinance Adoption. Recommendation that council ratify the memorandum of understanding between the city and the Santa Barbara Firefighters Association by adoption of, by reading of title only, an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara adopting the 2022 through 2025 memorandum of understanding between the city of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara City Firefighters Association. Item 4, 2022 to 2025 Police Officers Association Bargaining Unit Memorandum of Understanding, ordinance adoption. Recommendation that council adopt the memorandum of understanding between the city and the Santa Barbara Police Officers Association by adoption of, by reading of title only, an ordinance of the council of the city of Santa Barbara adopting a memorandum of understanding between the city of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara Police Officers Association for the period of July 1, 2020 through July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. Item 5, grant funding for the Plaza Del Mar Band Shell Renovation Project Resolution. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 22059, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2023 to increase revenue and expenditure appropriations by $233,452 in the Parks and Recreation Department fiscal year 2023 capital outlay fund for the Plaza Del Mar Band Shell Renovation Project. Funds were received from the California Department of Parks and Recreation, Santa Barbara Foundation, Ann Jackson Family Foundation, Alex Twig-Tui Foundation, Santa Barbara Beautiful, and private donors. Item 6, authorization to submit state revolving fund loan applications for the Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project resolutions. Recommendation that council A, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara authorizing filing a financial assistance application for a financing agreement from the State Water Resources Control Board for the planning, design, and construction of the Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project. B, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara declaring its official intent to reimburse capital expenditures paid prior to the approval by the State Water Resources Control Board of a drinking water state revolving fund installment agreement for the Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project. And C, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the council of the city of Santa Barbara dedicating and pledging the water fund net system revenue to payment of any and all drinking water state revolving fund financing for the Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project.
Does anyone on council need to pull an item? I would like to pull item 11. Would you read that one, please?
Item 11, approval of minimum standard requirements for aeronautical activities at the Santa Barbara Municipal Airport.
Very good. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our new airport director, Chris Hastert, and also to acknowledge Brian Demore, who's been done a fabulous job as our interim airport director. So would you gentlemen just care to say a few words for us, please? Director Hastert.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse and City Council members. It's a pleasure to be here. I had an opportunity to meet a couple of you out at the waterfront, and I look forward to meeting the rest of you in person. It's been a fun first week, and I can honestly say that Brian did an excellent job of briefing me on what's going on with all of the issues, including noise and all of these other issues that I will be getting up to speed on very quickly. And we're definitely here to speak about minimum standards if you have any questions about it. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, Brian?
Well, I'd agree with your assessment on Mr. Demore doing a fabulous job, and I think we all would. So congratulations and welcome to Santa Barbara.
Thank you very much.
All right, very good. Are there any public speakers on the consent?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one hand raised.
Okay.
Two hands raised.
Okay, very good.
Dr. Charlotte Gallup Moore, and then Charlotte Anderson.
Okay, and would the speakers please identify which item they're speaking to, please?
Dr. Charlotte Gallup Moore, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Apologies for my camera photo. That was not my intention, but I am speaking to item number 14 in regards to our homeless intervention related to allocating dollars to PATH. And I understand PATH
Ma'am,
is one of those nonprofits.
excuse me, ma'am, that's part of our regular agenda. That's going to come up later, so if you could hold your comments to then, we'll address that later. That's not on consent. All right, next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is Charlotte Anderson. Charlotte Anderson, please go ahead.
Hi, can you guys hear me all right? Hello.
Hi, I'm not a technical guy, but I have no idea why your audio is a little, is reverberating.
Ms. Anderson, if you are listening on another device, please turn the volume down on the other device. That may help.
Yes, I just turned off the television. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Hi. Can you guys hear me all right now?
Yes, go ahead. Which item are you speaking to, please?
Section 11 on the minimum standards proposed to the airport.
All right, very good. It's been read. Go right ahead.
I have a couple concerns regarding the proposed revisions to the minimum standards. As mentioned in the discussion of this document, you state that this will make the airport available for public use on reasonable terms and without unjust discrimination to all types, kinds, and classes of aeronautical activities. Now, onto our concerns. Under the Flying Club section, under the proposed revisions, it stated that major alterations and major repairs by a qualified mechanic club member is only permitted in a facility that meets applicable fire and safety codes. Now, our issues with the wording of this and what is required by the city to meet these standards that's considered a facility. From this wording, technically a hangar could be considered one of these if they meet those fire and safety codes. This just provides a lack of clarity. If flying club members can work in any hangar and someone else is paying for the hangar, who's going to be paying for the maintenance insurance? There's all these, the NFPA fire codes for safety in airplane maintenance facilities. And in regards to this NFPA 409, which is specific to maintenance in someone's own hangar, there's concerns whether or not someone will be bringing in someone else's plane into one of the city-run hangars. So, for example, T hangars are specific to each plane, and you'd only be able to do maintenance on that one plane. If you bring in another person's plane to the hangar, there are no permits in relation to that. So there needs to be some clear standards for that. And in regards to that, who will be enforcing these new standards? When we went to the fire department this morning, they didn't seem to have an idea that this was happening and that they would have to essentially check out these new hangars to see if they're up to code to be considered one of these maintenance facilities. There's all these different permits they would need through the fire department for maintenance specific items. Aside from major alteration and repairs, if they're doing simple things such as tire changes, oil changes, they would need specific hazardous waste and facilities permits for these. So our concern is who will be enforcing these new standards, if they're allowed to work in their own hangars, which it seems like based on the wording underneath flying clubs, they will be allowed to do. And yeah, that is basically it. Who will be enforcing this? Because it didn't seem like the fire department knew. And yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
State that this will be, without discrimination. And it seems like it's kind of
Okay, thank you.
in relation to economic discrimination from flying clubs.
Actually, yeah, you're out of time now, so thank you for your comments.
Mr. Mayor, we do have one more raised hand for consent who had raised their hand.
Okay, and that'll do it for the consent calendar. Go right ahead.
Very good. And that's Sean Sullivan. Sean Sullivan, please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, I'm Sean Sullivan with Above All Aviation, and again, we're here talking about the MSRs for the airport. We have a couple concerns. I addressed you guys a couple weeks ago about independent operators being considered a commercial operator. We think that wording really needs to be adjusted in the definitions. Our other concern is Article 10, Section 10.1, Paragraph B. The first sentence states that aircraft ownership must be in the name of the flying club or owned by all its members. This should be worded and by all its members, not or. The current wording allows for an artificially low buy-in cost to become a club member, enhancing the opportunity for the clubs to be utilized as under-the-radar flight schools. Article 10, Section 10.1, Paragraph D3, as currently worded, independent flight instructors can provide unlimited flight instruction in flying club aircraft with only the minimal financial burden of obtaining the permit to operate as an independent operator. This creates a significant economic advantage to the independent operator over operators with fixed places of business, which is in violation of Federal Grant Assurance 22, economic discrimination. In order to remedy this issue, independent flight instructors providing flight instruction to flying club aircraft must be required to be full members of said flying club in order to level the burden and create parity. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And that will do with the consent calendar. I don't need to pull item to vote on it. May I have a motion for the consent calendar?
I motion.
Okay,
Second.
motion by Gutierrez, second by Gutierrez. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Very good. This is a motion for the entirety of the consent calendar by Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez, seconded by Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez. Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
And Mayor Russ.
Aye. All right, passes unanimously, and we'll go to the report from the Ordinance Committee. Madam Chair, if you would.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. We heard 2 items today. One was California Building and Fire Codes adoption. We moved them forward in their entirety with the direction also to look at codes for gender-neutral bathrooms. And then we also heard Single-Family Design Board membership criteria and quorum requirements, recommending that we do reduce the total number of members, reduce the quorum requirements, and modify the qualifications, and also ask that off-cycle appointments be looked at.
Thank you very much. We will move on to the next item. Would you read the next item in, please, Madam Clerk?
Certainly. Item 13, ordinance to assign additional civilian police oversight duties to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. Ordinance introduction. Recommendation the council. A, introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by adding Chapter 2.09 to assign additional civilian police oversight duties to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners. And B, authorize and direct the city clerk's office to accept applications through Thursday, November 10th, 2022 at 5 p.m. for the special recruitment of 5 members to the Fire and Police Commission.
All right, very good. Ms. Anderson, if you would.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and members of the City Council. I'm Barbara Anderson, Senior Assistant to the City Administrator, and we are here today, yet again, to advance forward another important step in implementation of the new civilian oversight system of the Santa Barbara Police Department. This afternoon, as mentioned by the City Clerk, the recommendation from staff is that Council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading in title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by adding Chapter 2.09 to assign additional civilian police oversight duties to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners, and authorize and direct the City Clerk's office to accept applications through Thursday, November 10th at 5 p.m. for the special recruitment of 5 members of the Fire and Police Commission. The draft ordinance is a result of 13 months of work and community engagement by the Community Formation Commission, as well as deliberations by City Council and further research and community engagement facilitated by city staff. As mentioned to the Ordinance Committee, we are moving forward swiftly because we do not want to lose momentum from when the CFC's final report was delivered to Council, and when ideally a newly constituted Fire and Police Commission would step into their role and begin providing enhanced oversight of the Police Department as early as January 2023. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the members of our city team that have worked together over the past several months, stepping in after Chief Barney Malikian, Lieutenant Sean Hill, Sam Ramirez, and others who supported the CFC process, all in advancing what will be historic progress for the City of Santa Barbara. This includes our City Administrator, Rebecca Bjork, our Assistant City Administrator, Renee Irely, our Assistant City Attorney, John Doimus, Chief Kelly Gordon, Lieutenant Casey Corbett, who's sitting behind us, as well as Chief Chris Males. We are all committed to improving on the excellence of the Santa Barbara Police Department and Fire Department and what they strive to achieve every single day. For many years, our police department has been exceptionally proactive in embracing community-oriented policing, trainings on implicit bias, and engaging in authentic and empathetic relationship building with community members and organizations. The approach to a new civilian oversight system is no different. We are all working together to ensure that we meet the highest expectations for transparency and accountability, as well as build trust with communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. We are also fortunate to have city leadership that has advocated for and supported the efforts that have led us here today. As we did at the Ordinance Committee meeting, we feel it's important to note at the start of our discussion this afternoon that the ordinance does not sufficiently address every component of the new civilian oversight system, nor should it. The ordinance is meant to specifically codify, the new and elevated duties and authorities of police oversight for the Fire and Police Commission. There are other existing and new components of the civilian oversight system that will be documented in new policies and procedures. This includes the independent police monitor role in the city administrator's office, as well as the complaint process. There are also new legal requirements from the state of California, such as SB 2, that increase transparency and accountability regarding police misconduct that will be implemented and overseen by the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, also known as POST. We fully acknowledge how important it is to carefully document these components, how they will interact and support each other, as well as how they will be assessed. Documenting these components in policies and procedures also enable us to learn, evolve, and make modifications to ensure relevancy rather than an ordinance which remains static. Given the questions received during the Ordinance Committee's deliberations, I wanted to take a moment to speak specifically to the role of the independent police monitor. As aligned with the CFC recommendations, the police monitor within the city administrator's office will be receiving and processing complaints concerning alleged police misconduct, ensuring that the community is aware of the complaint process and how it may be accessed, monitoring the complaint process from submission through investigation, producing annual reports detailing the work of both the independent police monitor and the Fire and Police Commission, performing ongoing analysis of complaint trends, working to enhance community relationships and build trust through community engagement opportunities, and other duties as directed by the Commission and the City Administrator. The primary focus of the proposed ordinance is to assign new duties and authorities to the Commission that will be supported by the independent police monitor position, in addition to the current staff support from the City Attorney's Office, the Police Department, and the Fire Department. The Commission will conduct ongoing reviews of the complaint process and also facilitate more trust in and accessibility to this process. The Commission will also review reports on the number and type of internal and external complaints received and subsequent action taken, including the number of officers disciplined and the level of discipline imposed. The Commission will also review and discuss with the police chief in open session the contents of individual investigations if and when they become disclosable under the California Public Records Act. They will also receive presentations from the police chief concerning any officer-involved shootings once determinations or findings have been made by the agency conducting such an investigation. It should not be underestimated how engaging in these discussions in an open public forum will help facilitate collective learning, build trust, and shift understanding and perceptions. As you've seen, there is a lot of detail in the proposed ordinance, and it has been understandably challenging to engage our communities in this level of detail. Prior to the release of the ordinance to the public, city staff met with key stakeholder groups, including former members of the Community Formation Commission, as well as the Santa Barbara Police Department leadership team and the Police Officers Association. Our internal team made significant edits to the ordinance based on that feedback that we received. And then we released a draft to the broader public on August 23rd for a 30-day public comment period. We only received 3 written public comments through the established email address, but we also presented to and are engaged 88 individuals over the course of 30 days to capture additional comments. The 54 total comments received are detailed in the stakeholder public comment matrix attached to the council agenda report. Members of the Ordinance Committee also received public comment that included a red line draft from 3 more former members of the Community Formation Commission after the close of the 30-day public comment period, but prior to the ordinance committee meeting on September 27th. Given the number of questions we received regarding the contents of this document from members of the public, we included both the staff written ordinance as well as the ordinance with edits recommended by the ordinance committee as attachments to this your council agenda report. I'll refer to Mr. Joymus to expound upon this.
Thank you, Barbara. Mayor, members of the council, just to expand upon what occurred in the ordinance committee, due to the amount of comments we received, the ordinance committee followed the legislative process under the Brown Act. There was nothing unusual, which is, like as council today, can receive public comment orally written up to the meeting, and they received that comment, they acted upon it, and it was also very transparent because the two substantive changes were announced orally. And just to continue on with that, we included those changes, as Barbara said, in the materials today. So we just wanted to address that. There was nothing unusual in terms of receiving or acting upon public comment up to the day of the meeting.
So from all the comments received, there were several areas of broad support. This includes the exclusion of individuals who have a sustained finding of serious misconduct. This is more detailed than any other ordinances we've researched from other municipalities, but critically important in ensuring the legitimacy and the credibility of the commission. It also includes the guidance provided in consideration of criminal history. We absolutely want to support and encourage individuals that have been impacted by the criminal justice system to serve on this commission. Additionally, there is broad support for the rigorous and comprehensive orientation and training program as detailed in the ordinance, as well as the power and duties as outlined, given the limitations of the charter. This is tailored to meet the current needs of our community and still allows for us to learn and evolve as needed. On September 27th, the Ordinance Committee directed further changes to the proposed ordinance. This included several changes to the orientation and training section that specifically referenced input from the commission in determining necessary training, training to include principles and best practices of effective oversight, that trainings may be facilitated by local community organizations, professional facilitators, and/or recognized experts in these topics, and a reference training specific to the fire department. Staff fully acknowledges that the orientation and training section is not exhaustive. We want to ensure that it is tailored to meet the needs required by the new duties and authorities assigned to the commission, as well as from input and expertise of the commissioners. This will be much more detailed in development of a new civilian oversight systems policies and procedures manual, as well as the creation of the orientation and training guide. The proposed ordinance also includes additional sections and powers and duties that state the commission can request to collect data or information relevant to police department or fire department practices that are relevant to filling its powers and duties. Though we want to note that there is already an entirely separate section that provides this level of access to records for the commission. The Ordinance Committee also suggested that there would be additional language that more clearly delineates the police monitor role in the city administrator's office. This language was previously included in 3 sections, but is now clarified in additional sections in the proposed ordinance. Per the recommendation of the Ordinance Committee, the proposed ordinance now includes language that excludes former law enforcement officers and firefighters who've worked for any agency within Santa Barbara County from serving on the commission. Though the city received 10 comments proposing this exclusion, staff ultimately chose not to include it in its draft ordinance due to the city charter explicitly geared to having an open membership for the commission. Overall, we felt that explicitly excluding local expertise and knowledge obtained from formerly working for a police or fire department within the county could be detrimental to the discourse of a review-based model of oversight. This was also supported by respondents to the survey facilitated by the Community Formation Commission. 65% of community members believe that people with prior law enforcement experience should be eligible to serve on the oversight board. A subset of those respondents, 23%, clarified that yes, but after a period of a number of years, mostly landing on 5 years. The Ordinance Committee also removed the requirement to participate in both a 4-hour minimum day shift and a 4-hour minimum night shift ride-along with the police department, along with allowing for an equivalent immersive experience to ride-alongs. Staff's recommendation reflects that there is no equivalent experience to a ride-along, but also provides for accommodations on a case-by-case basis for commissioners in need of them, which offer different learning opportunities such as virtual simulations, observing body camera footage, or spending time observing dispatch. So once again, this afternoon, the recommendation from staff to council is to introduce and subsequently adopt an ordinance of the council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by adding a new section to assign additional civilian police oversight duties to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners and authorize and direct the initiation of a special recruitment of fire and police commissioners. As mentioned earlier, both the proposed ordinance as referred by the Ordinance Committee, that's Attachment 1, and the ordinance as drafted by staff, Attachment 2, are included in the council agenda report and are available to be referred to during your deliberations. We are also prepared to answer any questions you may have. At this time, I would like to welcome Chief Gordon to share a few remarks, and then we can turn it back to council.
Chief Gordon?
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. First, I would like to start by expressing our appreciation for all of the work of the Community Formation Commission, the collaboration with all of the community leaders and organizations, city leadership, and city staff in creating this new civilian oversight system as drafted in the ordinance that was presented by staff. The Santa Barbara Police Department believes in the importance of strengthening community oversight as well as the additional review and oversight that Senate Bill 2 creates at the state level through the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. The men and women serving the Santa Barbara Police Department are phenomenal public servants and first responders. I have 27 years of experience in policing as well as responding to national disasters, and I can tell you from my short time here, that is a 100% true statement. And that is now what used to be an outsider now is I'd like to consider myself as part of the family. That has been my experience in my time here. They are truly phenomenal public servants. And that goes as well from all my interactions with fire as well. We are committed to ensuring the safety and vibrancy of this beautiful city and strengthening transparency and accountability among all of our unique and diverse community members. We look forward to working with and supporting the new Fire and Police Commission and coordinating closely with the City Administrator's Office in meeting all of the community and commission's expectations on behalf of the Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go to questions, I would like to announce to those waiting online to speak, we're going to cut off public speech hand raising at 3 o'clock. All right, so if you want to speak, please raise your hand online. Madam Clerk, do you have any instructions or anything for folks that want to do that? If you would, please.
If you are online in Zoom, you can raise your hand in Zoom. If you are on Zoom on the phone, I believe we have 1 or 2 people like that. To raise your hand, if you're on the phone, you're going to press *9 on your phone. So if you wish to speak on this item and you're on the phone, please press *9.
Okay, we'll go to questions from council. First up, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Anderson, could you talk about a couple of those points for me? Just more than the talking lines you went through so far in the staff report and your narrative. In your view, and in staff's view, because I realize it's been a team effort, I'm sorry, but if you could talk a little bit about why it's important to include the perspective of former police or fire personnel.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, we noted several justifications, again, leading towards inclusion rather than exclusion in membership of the commission. We referred to City Charter Section 802 that only requires that a member be an elector of the city during their term and not a current employee. That is the only requirements of the city charter for commission membership. We also considered membership requirements of the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission has the same membership requirements imposed by Section 802 of the charter and has the jurisdiction to decide on disciplinary appeals made by any classified officer or employees under the civil service system. However, it does not have any such exclusion for former law enforcement officers or firefighters in Santa Barbara County. Consequently, we wanted to ensure some parallel membership qualifications existed between the two commissions, since there's ultimately a relationship between oversight and the disciplinary process.
So just in regards to that nexus to the Civil Service Commission, those members are actually dealing in real-time, actual disciplinary actions of civil service employees, which would include fire and police personnel, right?
Mayor Russ and Councilmember Jordan, Mr. Doimus can speak more articulately to this, but yes, you are correct. They're advising on appeals of disciplinary action.
While the proposed Fire and Police Commission is actually advising and participating after the fact of those, correct?
Yes, they're discussing those investigations once they're available through the California Public Records Act. They are not advising on active investigations or advising on disciplinary action in active investigations.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. Doimus?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Jordan. Yeah, when you say live action, they are acting as administrative law judges. They are deciding the fate of an employee, whether it be a suspension, a termination, or a demotion. So they are deciding the employee's future employment with the city, and it's only appealable to a court, not even to council. And furthermore, if you take that route, an employee can't bring a subsequent employment action later, like a FEHA lawsuit. So there's great reverence given to the Civil Service Commission.
And then, if you, Ms. Anderson, if you could also speak to your views on the importance of an experience like Ride Along as being part of the perspective of potential or functioning commission members.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, we engaged with many members of the public, including law enforcement stakeholders, that spoke to their personal experiences on ride-alongs, as well as the importance of ride-alongs as part of the orientation and training program. Personally, I have found it profoundly valuable to have that experience and will commit to ongoing experiences in that regard. We're simply saying that there's no equivalent. You know, sitting next to an officer, having that experience for a minimum of 4 hours. In all honesty, 4 hours goes by really quickly, and it could be much more in terms of a timely commitment than that. And to have that experience both during the day and at night, it really allows you to see and understand even the feel of adrenaline, the decision-making, the quickness, the efficiency, the thoughtfulness, the level of engagement, the amount of training that goes into both fire personnel and law enforcement personnel to be able to serve our community in the way that they do. Again, there is no equivalent, but we're happy to provide accommodations on a case-by-case basis as needed.
And I just want to refer back to your original, the original draft, not what we're calling the red line draft, in that, in your opinion anyhow, that the wording that's in that draft would accommodate somebody on a case-by-case basis if there was some level of trauma associated with them meeting the expectation of a ride-along, correct?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, again, from the experience in the short time that I've been in this position for the last 4.5 months, there are many individuals in our community that have experienced trauma at the hands of law enforcement, not necessarily in our community in the city of Santa Barbara, but in other regions, or have had family members that have had that experience. We also learn through various studies that 3 years on the job for law enforcement officers exposes them to a level of trauma more so than any individual would have in their entire lifetime. So we have it on both sides. And we want to acknowledge that commissioners can request accommodations as well as anyone that we work with can request accommodations. So that is included in the staff proposed ordinance to make sure that we work with them on a case-by-case basis. And honestly, there's so many opportunities for us to build that bridge to both address those personal traumatic experiences as well as to build and create understanding and empathy on both sides.
And then, are you actually making a recommendation today on one of the choices, or are you just presenting the two choices?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, I appreciate the question. It is for staff to support the direction of council and to heed the process of the ordinance committee. But our comments today are justifying the staff written ordinance.
Okay, and I'm cringing every time I hear the ordinance committee. Did that come out of the ordinance committee unanimously?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, no, it did not. It was a 2-1 vote of the three members.
Would have been nice to see that vote in just as a note. It more looks like a item that came out unanimously because it just keeps using the phrase ordinance committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Anderson, did the Formation Commission, I'm going to speak to specifically the two changes that came up. Did the commission itself discuss those two specific issues, and did they make a recommendation on those, and if so, what were those recommendations?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, yes, they did. And I couldn't calculate the number of hours of deliberations they had on that specific recommendation, but it was many, many hours of discussion, as well as thorough research, consultation from other independent police monitors, national experts in the field, in terms of where they landed. And so I just want to make sure that I have the direct recommendations also included in the stakeholder matrix on membership, but I want to read it directly from the report, and I should have had it pulled up. So up to one seat on the civilian oversight body may be filled by a community member with lived experience as sworn law enforcement who meets the following criteria. They have not previously served as a sworn law enforcement officer in Santa Barbara County. They have been retired from law enforcement for 7 or more years, and that they do not have a history of serious misconduct while serving as a sworn law enforcement officer. And it details that misconduct as we've detailed it in the ordinance.
So the recommendation from the commission, and I know there was a lot of discussion and on there, was after 7 years of no longer being in law enforcement, they'd be eligible to serve, but no one in the city of who served in the city of Santa Barbara would be eligible, but from other departments. I just want to clarify.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, the clarification is that no one who has served in Santa Barbara County can serve. They have been retired from law enforcement for 7 or more years. So they eliminated membership for anyone in Santa Barbara County, and then anyone outside of that, it would be retired for 7 years.
Thank you. And then my other question, I guess, would be from my colleagues on the ordinance committee. If you'd care to just help me understand in the public just what the thought process was on the changes. In particular, how, when the police ride along, since it is so valuable, how does that enhance the commission? And then the other changes that you recommended as well on how, I'm trying to word this, is how does that improve the commission versus what staff had recommended in terms of transparency for the public, but also ensuring that there's buy-in from the police department as well? Because we're dealing with two things here. We want to have the cultural buy-in and the change in the police department. So how does this promote that as well? And was that encountered in your thinking? I'm just trying to wrap my head around why the change came in. So thank you.
So, Mr. Friedman, are you directing your question to a specific member of the ordinance committee? Or?
It could be either one, but if Councilmember Snen as the chair wants to take it first, you can, or Councilmember Gutierrez, it's either one. I'm not,
Okay,
I'm not putting anybody on the spot, but either one.
That'd be fine to answer to the questions. I don't want to get into deliberations before we get to public comment.
But just,
So-
just the question of why the changes came in.
Very
and
good.
what
Okay,
the-
Ms. Sneddon,
what
if
the
you would,
reasoning
please.
was.
Understood. Thank you. And thank you for asking the question because I think it's a very important point. especially because there were recommendations that came out of the CFC. And just first in terms of process, there was the Community Formation Commission was then disbanded. Once it was disbanded, those individuals could provide public comment as individuals after that. There were two very deeply contested recommendations, and you've hit on both of them, the lived experience and the ride-along. For the lived experience, the idea of bringing that forward to council is that it be a council decision. I can say for myself that I'm not attached one way or another to this recommendation, but felt it was important that council saw this recommendation to make that decision. It had not been before council. The other, on the ride-along, my understanding at that time was that there were alternatives such as riding along on bicycles, social service visits, maybe even sting operations, but that it might not require 2 4-hour shifts in the vehicle. If I'm not attached to either one of those recommendations, but felt strongly through process that they should be considered by the full council. That was the intention of bringing that red line version forward. And we ran out of time on that ordinance committee meeting, went right up to the time and actually didn't have time for deliberative comments, or I would have made such comments at that time. I offered to carry it over to another ordinance meeting. We decided just to go for the vote, which was not unanimous. I'll say for myself, it's very important that today's direction is unanimous. But those two particular points, for myself, the point of bringing those forward is so that council could fully consider them without an attachment to which direction they go in.
All right, thank you. Mr. Freeman, did that address your question?
Yeah, thank you. That was exactly what I was hoping to, just the thought process that went behind it. Thank you.
And did you have a continuance of that question for Mr. Gutierrez, who also sits on that?
If he would like to answer, I'd love to hear from both of them.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you. Yeah, let me just kind of give you my perspective on it. So when I went on my ride along, I specifically asked ahead of time to people I know that are police officers as to when would be the best day to get a full immersive experience of what it's like to be a police officer on any given day. And they said, go on a holiday, so that you know what it's like, that we have to give up our holidays with our friends and family, and you get to see on a more compact day what we have to deal with year round. So I chose New Year's Eve because a lot of them said, if you really want to see some stuff, go on New Year's Eve. So I did. So, and I did see some really, even for me, just going on that one day, it took me well over a month to process it. And this is what they're dealing with on a daily basis, you know? So in that experience, when I spoke to them and I asked them what it's like to be a law enforcement officer, some of the things that they told me were completely eye-opening to me, in the sense of, you know, they told me how once you become a police officer, your fellow police officers and their families become your family. That becomes your circle, your clique. That's who you socialize with off the clock. And furthermore, they expressed this issue that they face, where they can't really turn off being a law enforcement officer. They're always kind of like making sure that things are being peaceful around them, even when they're not officially on the clock. So to me, when it came to hearing some of the commissioners, by the way, I just want to make it clear that it wasn't the entire commission that proposed this to us, it was just a few of them. So I just want to make that clear. The few that proposed not having law enforcement that served in the county be on this commission made sense to me because of that. And during the ordinance committee meeting, I even had the chief come up and I asked him that specifically, and he concurred that yes, that when you're a newly sworn officer, that is pretty much the case, that your friends are your fellow officers and their families, and that's pretty much it. But he did clarify that once you get closer to retirement age, that's not so much the case, which makes sense that near the end of your career, you're more willing to want to stop thinking like that or acting like that. So that was my mindset with allowing it to come forward to the full council for further discussion. The other question I had for city staff was, so a lot of people were questioning this red line document that was submitted to us by some of the commissioners. And I just want to further, you already clarified it, but I want to just further the point, because even some of the other commissioners seem to be confused as to how the Brown Act acts or is related to the way we interpreted the situation. I was told by some city staff that it was too late to submit information to us, but that didn't make sense to me or other council members. So can you just clarify that the process in which we received this information was completely acceptable?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Gutierrez. In terms of the question about submitting public comment too late, that's just only for the agenda packet. If we were to include that as a document as part of that, that has to be within 72 hours. But just receiving public comment, we could do that today, where someone can come to that podium right now and hand you a document, and you look at it and ask questions off it and deliberate and take considerations of that. That email came in a little over 24 hours, and as I mentioned, that is perfectly fine under the Brown Act, and it was considered, mentioned. The two most important policy changes that were brought forth for council for consideration that were the areas of greatest discourse during the CFC were the ride-along issue, as well as the membership of firefighters and police officers from Santa Barbara County. So that there's nothing unusual by that. The cutoff only refers to the agenda packet, but in order to receive, that could be today, and it could be council members can consider oral public comment during deliberations, and someone posing a good idea. And so everything is following in accordance to the Brown Act. There are no issues with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because it happened earlier today during the ordinance meeting, where a member of the public suggested something that was not agendized, and we decided to push that forward to the rest of the council as well. So I just wanted to make sure that that was reiterated, and also pointed out that the adjustments that we've brought to the rest of the council have been discussed by the commission, and even stated before the commission was even formed. So this wasn't issues that were just brought up out of nowhere. They've literally been discussed since before day one. So just want to make that clear.
I believe Ms. Connect would like to weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Gutierrez, if I could just add one point to that question also. The council, as you know, has specific procedures that guide the council in all manner of things. And one specific procedure guides the submission of materials to the council, which would also apply to the ordinance committee. And it provides that in complex matters, if a member of the public wanted to submit materials that they wanted the council to consider, it recommends that those materials be submitted the week before to ensure that those materials are delivered in the packet to the council. But it provides that materials can be submitted up to the very day of the council meeting, but there's no legal requirement that the council consider those materials. It's completely within the discretion of the council or the ordinance committee if they want to consider those materials or not. So at that ordinance committee meeting, it would have been completely in your discretion to consider those materials or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. And I have one more
Mayor Rouse,
question.
just before we move off that, I just want to clarify that the item that was brought forward on the council ordinance committee today was agendized. It just wasn't included in the recommendations from staff. I don't want people to think we were forwarding things from ordinance committee that weren't on the agenda. So it was on the agenda, it just wasn't a part of staff recommendation.
Thank you. So when it comes to the Civil Service Commission that was brought up earlier, it's from my understanding and my experience, I was the liaison to that commission, that we council members cannot bear witness to their official meetings. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Gutierrez, no, their meetings are public hearings under the Brown Act. So when you have a hearing there where you have the commissioners You usually have a hearing officer, you have the department on one side, the employee and the representative on the other side. Those meetings are open to the public, so anyone can attend those meetings. The portion that's closed to the public is deliberations, and that's under the Brown Act when you're deliberating an employee's employment decision. So that's the only portion that's closed, is deliberations. But the entire meeting, the testimony given, arguments given, opening, closing argument remarks, all that is open per the Brown Act.
Gotcha. All right, thanks for clarifying that.
All right. Ms. Gutierrez, questions to staff?
Yeah, I have a couple questions on the presentation. Let's see, on slide 8, I believe, public outreach and draft to the ordinance. You had mentioned you had outreach to police leadership. Could you explain who's part of that police leadership?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Gutierrez, we met with the entire leadership team, which includes the chief and command staff, as well as all of the sergeants of the department. And then we also met with the Police Officers Association Board of Directors.
Thank you. And then on slide 9, where it says comprehensive orientation and training programs, and you mentioned trainings on those topics. Could you explain what topics the trainings would be on?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Gutierrez, we actually detailed this extensively, as we mentioned, in comparison to other ordinances, especially in support of other commissions in the city of Santa Barbara. We have everything from requirements on ethics training, Brown Act, as well as training on police oversight and community policing. We also mentioned in the introduction of the staff written ordinance that this would be including community-based leaders and organizations. We also have training to better understand the history of race and policing, the importance of equity and the cultures that make up the Santa Barbara community, training on components of the criminal justice system and other relevant subject matters facilitated by the police department or through the Citizens Academy, excuse me. The ride-along requirement, training on the quasi-judicial duties and obligations of the commission, and the development of a comprehensive training and orientation guide in coordination with the fire and police department. So again, including a section that would accommodate any other requests for training or additional training that we felt was relevant to the commission moving forward.
Thank you.
Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. Thank you so much. So first on the qualifications or requirements, I forgot what we called them in here, just so that I'm understanding it correctly, whether or not we include any specific requirements or qualifications into this ordinance, we still as a council would decide who sits on this board. So I guess where I'm sort of having a little bit of a disconnect, if we don't include any restrictions, we could still vote not to include a law enforcement personnel, for example, onto the board. Is that correct?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Harmon, it's absolutely correct.
Okay.
The
So we
appointments
retain
are
that.
under your purview, yes.
And nothing in either version of this ordinance would take away the discretion of this body from making whatever appointments, other than, I guess, restrictions on application?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful. And then my only other question is on the ride-along and immersive experience change that was forwarded by ordinance. My major concern, I guess, is that it looks like, and maybe I'm just not understanding it correctly, but in staff's draft, it says that commissioners can request accommodations. In the ordinance draft, the ability to request accommodations has been struck. So it reads to me like commissioners can no longer request accommodations if we were to go with that version. So I guess maybe that's to be addressed by ordinance during their comments, or staff could, but we don't need to take the time. But I guess was that intentional?
Mayor Russ and Councilmember Harmon, I think it was the intention of those who proposed the edits that the equivalent immersive experience would be those accommodations.
Okay. That reads to me like it's less fulsome now rather than the opposite, but thank you. I appreciate that.
But Ms. Gutierrez, you have one more question?
Yes, one more question. Can a city staff walk me through, just briefly, on the hiring process of the police monitor? Because I've gotten questions from the public, you know, is this somebody that council's going to appoint, city administrator, or the police oversight? So if we can get just a little background on the
I think we
hiring
let our city administrator answer that question. Ms. Bjork, please.
Mayor Alice, Council Member Alejandro Gutierrez. The staff person that I have assigned to be the police monitor at this point in time is Ms. Anderson. I did do a recruitment with anticipating the likelihood of moving forward with some form of police oversight in, February, March period, I think, and had a number of applicants and selected Ms. Anderson from that pool. Subsequently, council had also suggested and authorized hiring of a independent police monitor expert to assist Ms. Anderson as she comes up to speed in that area, although I must say she is well up to speed with her credentials and her history of work experience already. And so Ms. Anderson is in the process right now of reviewing credentials and proposals for an external party to assist in that monitoring for the first year or so, and then continue as needed thereafter. She will make a recommendation, and then that will come to you as a professional services contract.
All right, thanks very much. We will go from here to public comment on the matter. Because of the number of public speakers, we want to get through the item and hear everybody. We're going to go to 2 minutes per speaker. And if anybody here in the room wants to submit a speaker slip, please do it right now. All right? We have my glasses. That's what we have. Oh, there we are. Heather Clack is going to give her time to Eric Beecher, as is Jessica. Is Heather here, by the way? And then Jessica Olmeyer, right there, to Eric Beecher. And then we have Eric Beecher. So per our rules, that'll be a combined 4 minutes. Mr. Beecher, if you'd like to come forward.
I believe it's going to be 6 minutes, but I'll try to do it in 4.
That's not actually the way they read, but we went through this. But I'll give you a little leeway, Mr.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse and council members. My name is Eric Beecher. I stand before you today as the Executive Director representing the Santa Barbara Police Officers Association. I appreciate your time and this opportunity to speak on the matter of the ordinance amending the duties of the Fire and Police Commission. The POA has been in support of some sort of police oversight since it was first discussed amongst council in the summer of 2020. Our board members reviewed and participated in meetings of the Community Formation Commission throughout their research process, encouraged our membership to engage with the members of the CFC and their representatives. Made time to meet one-on-one with several of the members of the commission, including myself. We were surprised at the, we believe, utter disrespect with which a minority of members from the former CFC have treated this process. The fact that they submitted a draft ordinance substantially different from the draft put forward by staff at the 11th hour, we believe, limiting the public review. And I know you guys said that it was legal. I'm not saying it was illegal, but the perception is that it seemed very shady, very last minute, and it just did not seem fair to the public to be able to hear what was being changed. The fact that the Ordinance Committee Chair put forward the draft of the former CFC for a vote without amendment was quite alarming to us. The POA has two strong objections to the RLG draft brought forward by the Ordinance Committee for you today. The first is a prohibition of anyone who has served as a law enforcement officer or firefighter in Santa Barbara County from serving on the commission. The second is the requirement for ride-alongs as part of the training and experience for a commission member. Sadly, during the Ordinance Committee meeting discussing the draft ordinance, not a single member of the committee suggested there was any positive experience or expertise to be brought forward by former law enforcement. One committee member went so far as to ask how or whether it would be possible to deprogram an officer following retirement to make them suitable candidate for this commission, which is, I don't understand why someone would need to be deprogrammed. It's mind-blowing. A commitment to service and selflessness to potentially give their life in defense of a stranger, the honor and dedication of a career as a public servant, I recognize that many of the issues surrounding law enforcement, particularly in our community, stem from a lack of communication. The training and experience of former law enforcement officer or firefighter in discussing matters before the commission should be welcomed, and I would argue perhaps even necessary. There is no secondary reference available to provide such context to an informed discussion. Such expertise should absolutely come from someone with local experience. The CFC has asked you to review police oversight through a national lens and has provided no local examples of misconduct of which they are certain people of Santa Barbara suffer. I would ask you give careful consideration to experiences not only of the people who live, work, and visit here, but to the first responders who have served here as a valuable resource in creating a committee that best serves our community. As to the subject of ride-alongs, there is simply no other comparable experience. I did many ride-alongs. In fact, Mr. Gutierrez, you rode with me before you became a council member, and I remember what you said to me was, it opened your eyes to things that you had no idea that was happening in Santa Barbara, and that's a true fact. I mean, you cannot get another experience like that, and it's just, it's something that has to be there. While these opportunities can be challenging for many and cause discomfort for some, how do we challenge the minds of both officers and the community members if we never challenge those predispositions? A very small minority of respondents to the ordinance survey suggested that one need not participate in a ride-along to understand police misconduct, but how do you identify misconduct if you never have a foundation for understanding the policing, what policing is to begin with?
Mr. Beach, I need you to kind of wrap up here.
Okay. I'll skip the last paragraph. The draft ordinance put forward by staff is a progressive move forward for both the community and policing in our city. The RLG draft is harmful to both. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Lizzie Rodriguez.
Greetings, Mayor Rouse and council members. It's been 18 months. Wow, what a journey it has been. It has been an honor to serve on both the Community Formation Commission and the Fire and Police Commission, and I thank you for allowing us this opportunity and this responsibility. We are moments away from creating an important ordinance oversight entity, not because of a critical event that occurred in our city, but because we are a community that values progressive policies and because we encourage civic engagement. You've heard a lot of ideas, suggestions, demands, so I can't really say anything today that you already haven't heard from me or from others. So I'd just like to remind you and the public the duties, the role of the Fire and Police Commission. The Commission's scope of work is much broader than simply reviewing complaints of alleged misconduct. We attend to matters such as approving dance permits, tow operator fees, security uniforms and vehicles, administrative duties. We also approve the budget and review budgets for both city and fire departments, and most importantly, we provide feedback on policies and procedures within the departments. My experience serving on the current commission alongside a former fire chief who served the Santa Barbara City for over 35 years has given me insight into the value of having someone with professional experience on the commission. When reviewing police policies, the same is true for having a former sworn officer on the commission. Given the range of responsibility of the commission, it would be a disservice to our community to exclude professional experience vital to the commission's objectives. As you know, there are ways to prevent conflict of interest that could be explored in the policy and procedures. Furthermore, former law enforcement and fire personnel currently and formerly have served on the Fire and Police Commission without conflict. I appreciate the tough decision you have today, and I trust that whatever the outcome is, the folks who carry this forward will do so with the best interest of the city in mind. So thank you for allowing us this opportunity, and I'm proud to have been part of it thus far.
Thank you. Benjamin Pitterly. I said that correctly, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon. I'm Benjamin Pitterly. I do environmental work in town. I'm here representing myself as a community member. And I just wanted to express that I support, well, to be honest, as a member of the public, it's been a little confusing because which version I want to say I support, because there have been multiple ordinances presented. I guess I want to say I support the ordinance that was approved by the ordinance committee with respect to and for the record too, I just want to reiterate, there was nothing shady about the process through which public comment was provided. I've been doing policy work for like 15, 16 years now, and I think the process was followed, and it should be respected. I guess 2 minutes is tough, so I'll get right down to the two matters at hand. I have perspective on at least one of them, but I've heard expressed here today by both the chief and Councilmember Gutierrez that it's a family, right? When you're a member of the law enforcement community here, it's a family, and that's a strong word to use. And I think that they mean that, and I respect that. However, when we're talking about independence and oversight, I think that it's important to acknowledge that biases or alignments, allegiances do matter, both in practice, how things are going to be evaluated, but also in just public perception. And that's an important part of what this organization will be tasked with, right? Is not just providing oversight, but building bridges between law enforcement and the community and building trust. And I think that's something that everybody here supports and wants to get to. So I would support the ordinance committee draft. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect on 2 minutes. Louisa Wood.
Good afternoon, Mayor Rouse, City Councilmen all, and members of the City Administrator's Office, Chief. Thank you for giving me the time to speak today. 2 minutes is quick. I'm here today standing before you as a former Community Formation Commission officer, commissioner, and I'm also on the Fire and Police Commission. I'm here also as a member of our community. I'm a teacher, I'm a mother, I'm a musician, and I'm a person. As a reminder, I have devoted my life and my career to supporting and advocating for individuals with disabilities and mental health disorders, and around the world and here in Santa Barbara. I have become embedded within this community, and I especially represent those. I speak for underrepresented and underserved people in this community. Almost 2 years ago, exactly, I submitted my application to join the Community Formation Commission because I believed and continue to believe today that my direct experience and knowledge has given me this expertise. And we worked together on the CFC. We took part in a process through months and months and months of arduous work, researching, learning, asking questions, meeting with folks from our police department, seeking out and listening to voices from individuals across our entire city to create a system of oversight that will successfully build trust and effective relationships between our community members and our police department. We submitted, I'm going off book here. We submitted a version, and we have the right to do that. But what we talked about came from the Community Formation Commission's recommendations. I believe in lived experience of police officers. I believe in what they do. I do believe that we need to have independence, and I believe that the citizens of Santa Barbara and our police department, that we need to be looking at the ordinance committee's version. I'm sorry, I'm feeling a little anxious. I want to voice my So the language in the approved version is much more in line with that what we have on the CSC developed and presented to the council. That language is necessary and important for effective oversight to occur. I know I have 10. I must also, yes, that's all I have. I'm sorry. That was very nerve-wracking.
Thank you. Rachel Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse and council members. I'm happy to be here today. And staff, thank you so much for all your work and presentations. Gosh, I had a perfectly 3-minute timed thing, so I'm just going to go off book as well. I just want to express gratitude, first of all, for my former CFC members who are still engaged in this process. We're not officially anything anymore. So this was all really just, folks who wanted to stay part of the conversation. So I really appreciate the ability to do that and to learn so much about the process along the way. We're still here because as much as you appointed us and set expectations, the community did as well, and those expectations are still very much with me. So not representing the CFC, just representing myself. I want to actually just spend some time talking about language. So one of the things the community wanted from us was transparency and something meaningful, and I think meaning comes from language. Language is important. So to address a couple things about the draft that I was a part of, I guess the so-called redlined version, it's really just a track changes Word document. We didn't write anything new. And most of the changes were just minor language changes, so things like correcting the title of the report on the first page. Like, there were minor language changes that unfortunately are not in version 1 that probably still need to be changed. The staff report indicated the elimination of ride-alongs. We suggested eliminating the night shift requirement. The language still says ride-alongs. And also, in that same section, I want to address Councilmember Harmon's question about accommodation. So in our discussion during public comment with city staff, we asked about, is this accommodation like ADA, like the American Disabilities Act? They were like, yeah. And I was like, well, if it's that, that's a given because that's law. So that's why we went with, well, what other kinds of accommodations? So if they mean trauma accommodations for that, then that isn't appropriate. So I really want us to be careful of language. I want us to actually look at the documents before us rather than talk about a staff one and a CFC one, because I don't think that really does justice to kind of what's actually happening here. But I'm super grateful that it's back in your hands. You're not the CFC, you're not city staff. This is what we want, is to have you actually tell us what the path forward is. So thank you.
Thank you. Mark Kramer.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. And thank you. I want to start off for thanking everybody in the room that's worked on this ordinance so far. I know there's a tremendous undertaking, and I'm sort of just coming at the end here, but I just want to speak about the qualifications and specifically about excluding the police and fire officers from working in the county. Looking at the desirable qualifications here, and I'm sorry for rereading this stuff, I know you guys have all done it many times, but you start off to promote diversity, fairness, and equity among the commission, and assuring it's inclusive and reflective of life and professional experience. So professional experience is my professional experience, and I think that's really relevant to this commission, and to keep that going forward is a really important part of this process. If you look at some of these considerations that they're asking me to take, it's that you have somebody that will garner the confidence and trust of the Santa Barbara community. That's the police and firefighters. We've earned that every day, and we continue to do that on every call. We keep everyone's politics out of it, no matter what it is. You treat everyone here with respect, and we have that confidence, and we haven't lost it yet. We also have relevant lived experience. We've demonstrated community standing, demonstrated history of collaborative working relationships with local government entities and nonprofit organizations. We also have relevant academic research and professional experience. So when you look at all these considerations, I think we touch on all of those and at least deserve being considered for this commission. And so to exclude us doesn't really promote the diversity, fairness, and equity that was spoken of here. And to speak just this last point of the academic research, I think that's really something that's spoken of our professions, is that we do a lot through our careers of keeping up with all the different standards and training, and there's a lot that goes into that. that doesn't get captured in ride-alongs. And so having that career of experience is very valuable to help the budget and everything else, and the commission is going to continue to do. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Christina Newheiser? Hauser?
Newhouser.
And I knew that.
It's easy. Hi. I'm not so happy to be here. Speaking of this, the ordinance was designed to provide transparency and regarding police operations and create an oversight committee. And so I know we've heard that it was legal and everything was above board, but the move on September 27th, I watched it on television, to accept the undiscussed red line edits from the 3 members of the CFC was not transparent, or it certainly did not appear that way if you're watching it. But, it's all perception. That's what it's all about, is perception. And so I think what may have been gained in the information you wanted to include, because you ran out of time, you lost in reputation. That's what the ordinance committee collectively loses in reputation. Another thing is excluding the public safety personnel from serving unless they've been out of the biz for 7 years. That's insulting. It's so insulting for anyone, just like that gentleman said, that has worked for the city. And not only that, but today is not 7 years ago. Someone who worked 7 years ago, they have no idea what's going on today. I worked there. I've been gone 3 years. The world today, you all know, is not what it was. And plus, this is Santa Barbara. This is not LA. So say they can't work here because if they worked in the county, that's just so absurd. It's just like your experience, you would be insulted also if you couldn't use your experience in the town where you live. And then as far as the ride-along program, oh my God, it's so ridiculous. I can't believe that people do not want to go on a ride-along. It is so exciting. I mean, you want to judge these people, and I think the 4-hour ride-along is absolutely absurd. These officers don't work 4 hours. They work 10 hours. They work 12 hours. And if you would have no idea of your patience level or your demeanor or anything else unless you do this. So I read this stuff where the formation committee wants all this. They think they should have all this training. And everyone always clamors because I got to have hands-on training. This is hands-on training. And so it shouldn't be a 4-hour ride-along. It should be a 10-hour ride-along, and it should be a 12-hour ride-along. And making accommodations, if you're afraid to be in a police car, or you're afraid to really see what these officers go through, then you shouldn't be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have some online speakers?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one online speaker, Gabe Escobedo. One moment. Gabe Escobedo, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, City Council. I just want to thank staff for all of their hard work. Thank the Community Formation Commission, and just bring up a couple of clarifying points on some of the stuff that I've heard today. So the first is about the composition of the Fire and Police Commission. We never said that we do not value the perspective, the life experience, the professional experience, the academic experience of anyone who has served as law enforcement. That has never been a part of our conversation or deliberations. What we said is, why introduce the bias of having those working relationships with folks that they do consider family, and rightly so? Why introduce that bias when we can get that same expertise from folks who live and work in our community, that have the life experience, professional experience, academic experience of law enforcement, that work somewhere else? This was endless debate and deliberations from the Community Formation Commission. For the folks that want to make it seem like our public comment should not have been weighed, all of the changes that we made to that document were in our CFC final recommendation. I kind of find it reprehensible to be characterized as anything other than that. And this is typically what happens when folks who do not understand what it's like to live under the burden of having to fear for interactions with law enforcement. The addition of the immersive experience, equivalent immersive experience, that term was actually proposed by Mr. Malekian, as an alternative to add accommodations beyond the ADA, actual accommodation for people who have real concerns. I just want to say that this is progress, and I think one thing that came out of our process that I'd like City Council to just weigh in this discussion. Law enforcement even agreed that if you had worked for the City of Santa Barbara Police Department, that you should not be eligible for the Fire and Police Commission. So this is a discussion really about whether it's the whole county or whether it's our PD. But to characterize us as diminishing the life experience of police officers is reprehensible, and I reject it. So the ball is in the city's court to make this work, and I hope that it does. But we're going to stay engaged. Again, thank you to all city staff. Thank you to you. Thank you to the Community Formation Commission. And look forward to seeing this be successful.
All right, thank you. Any further speakers online, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. Now it's back to council. First up is Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank everybody that came out to voice their opinions and concerns about this matter. As former commissioners have stated, what we're discussing now has been discussed since literally day one, and they were all in public meetings. So for you to come up here, some of you to come up here publicly and call out our credibility is just disrespectful, and I'm not gonna just sit here and like allow that to happen. That was really rude, and I don't appreciate it.
Okay, Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. Just want to say I have a very deep respect for our public servants, both our police officers and our firefighters every day. It is unbelievable to me that you are dedicated and risk your lives every day for our community. Nothing in this process calls that into question in any way at all. We have a progressive, forward-thinking police and fire department, both. I am extremely proud of our police force and our fire department, both. From day one, our progressive police department, our former chief, our current chief, have all been supportive of police oversight, including our city administrator's office, including all the council members. There's never been a question of the advisability of having civilian oversight. And that's very much to the credit of our acting officers today. Staff has worked tirelessly to bring recommendations forward, as have members of the community who came forward, donated their time to support and serve on the CFC. This has been a monumental and collaborative process. I want to take a little side note to say that there has been nothing shady or hidden. Everything has been public. As to the process, a note on that, and to the perception of shady as well. The ordinance to be considered wasn't released until the Thursday before the Tuesday meeting. In the exact parallel procedure as the ordinance that we're considering today, that you're all commenting on, wasn't released until Thursday, and today is a Tuesday. You don't have a week to put in public comment in writing. You don't have a week for it to be part of the board packet because you're commenting on the board packet. It has already been released. I take public comment and public input very seriously. Those of you who spoke today influence me. You influence my decision-making right up until the moment of a motion and a vote. That is democracy. That is the public process. So regardless of what we feel about the recommendations or where we land on it, the process was completely honored. And it's very important to me that there not be this continued accusation of shady or underhanded or going around. Staff was not shady. Our Our law department was not shady, our police officers are not shady, our fire department is not shady, and the members who stepped forward to serve and to volunteer on the Community Formation Commission are not shady. That is just needs to be aside from the conversation. We're repeating that exact process today. Something released on a Thursday, we're deliberating on a Tuesday, taking into account all public comment up until the moment of decision. Back to the 2 points that are in contention. I personally know several officers and firefighters who are serving today, who, if they were to serve on that commission today, would have welcome input. Some of them are sitting in this room right now. None that I would want excluded. I don't have a problem with lived experience, officers, firefighters, members who've worked in the county serving on this committee. My issue for bringing it forward to the council was exactly that point of perception. I just think it should be up to council to weigh in on it. If it had not come to full council, then again, it wouldn't be fully transparent. It wouldn't have been fully decided by the full body in front of you with the full benefit of the public comment that we're hearing today. That is the point. I don't think that we should be afraid of discussing these topics. We're all in this together. Everybody has worked so hard on this. Everyone in this room is dedicated. And again, no one in here has ulterior negative motives. We're trying to get to something good. I also have no contest to requiring ride-alongs, and neither did the CFC. Their recommendation was to not limit to both shifts, to have there be a choice of shifts. I don't have an issue with that either. On either of these points, they aren't things that I'm brought forward from ordinance to go to the mat for. They were things that in public discourse, in democracy, in the full light of transparency, should be discussed openly and without fear. It is most important to me today that we have a unanimous support. I'm going to support whatever moves forward. I'm not going to make a motion to move it forward. I just wanted it fully considered by the full council. And I will stand by our officers, I will stand by our firefighters, and I believe that once we have this in place, it's just going to confirm for us what we already know, that we have an incredibly progressive public servants. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gutierrez.
Can I go last, please?
May you go last, okay? Whatever last ends up being. Mr. Friedman?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the public that spoke today. And first, I want to start by thanking the current Police and Fire Commission commissioners and past that for years you've all done a great job on that commission of what it's constituted up until it gets changed. But you've done a lot of important work throughout our city for the year, and I think that's been lost in the conversation is those. And I know some of you are here today, some of you are in this room, and so I just want to know that your work is appreciated. Both those of you who are in law enforcement, fire, and also members of the public. You've all done a great job on that commission. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for the work that you all have done. Second, I want to thank our staff for working on this for many, many months now. It's been very contentious, but when you have items like these, they're supposed to be because they're important to the community, and there's a lot of perspectives, and working through that gets everything heard and ideas come forward. So I want to thank all of our staff on this, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Doimus, and others who worked with everyone to bring it to where we are. And also want to thank the Formation Commission members who took a lot of time out of your personal lives to try to make our community better. And it was very, mentioned, just very important discussions that I've had with a lot of different perspectives. So with that, I will just opine that I am supportive of the staff recommendation ordinance in terms of moving that forward. Well, I appreciate the discussion that took place from the full council. One, I feel that the ability for council to make the decision on if a member has experience in the field. I think that lived experience does matter, even if it's just one of the 5 members. There just is a lot of important perspective that comes in. And it's also critical to remember that this is one part of the commission. It's still going to continue to do that other work that needs to be done in the city that benefits all of our residents in other areas, and to have at least one member that understands the city process, or potentially one member, because the council could choose not to have a member, but that should be on the council. So supportive of that. And then in terms of the ride-alongs, I'm also supportive of the ride-alongs, and I really appreciated Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez talking about his experience in ride-alongs. And I could tell by in the passion of your voice that even though they happened, sometimes closer now, but maybe a couple years ago, that you still have certain memories that shaped you. And I also would like to share that I've been on 3 police ride-alongs in my life. One was just a few months ago here in Santa Barbara, and while it's still relatively recent, a lot has faded from memory, but there's a few things that I'm pretty confident will stand out in my memory. And it was a slow night, is what the officer kept telling me. Very slow night, and even on a slow night, there were things that I saw that changed my understanding of our city, of what takes place here. But the other 2 that I went on were in 1998, when I was a junior in college, and I was doing a semester in Washington, D.C., and we were actually, as students, part of the program I was in, we were required to do a police ride-along because we were studying the law. And a lot of, what do you want, criminal, but one of the requirements is do a police ride-along. You can go in any district in D.C. you wanted to go in, so my friends and I decided to go on not 1 but 2. But the first one we decided to go at night from 12 to 4 a.m. in the morning. And I'm not going to get into it, but the things I saw 25 years ago, I could still remember them today. And it forever changed the way I think about policing. This is in a big city and far different than here, but you still have to prepare, no matter where you are, for some of the things that you could see in the cities. And our law enforcement does an excellent job here of looking at all scenarios. And we're very fortunate to have the policing that we have here in Santa Barbara. I think we've mentioned many of the progressive things that we do, and the council supports it. We recently, in the last couple of years, have the co-response team that is making a big difference. But again, the police ride-alongs, there's nothing that compares, and I could speak to that from experience. And so just one thing, and I'll wrap up. So that's where I'm supportive of, but I just wanted to, for the ordinance committee, just my thoughts on voting on an ordinance and bringing that to the council for discussion. I appreciate that we had this discussion because it was important, because I think there were members of the community that felt that not having the full council discuss it, they would have felt left out, and we want to make sure they're heard. And I understand that's the intent, but from my years of experience in government and studying it, and is that when the ordinance committee takes a vote on something and it comes to council, it has the weight of the ordinance committee's vote. So it kind of changes the dynamic of the recommendation. So there are other options, and I would just say in the future, hopefully we won't have something as like this that comes forward, that, multi-year process, but if there are, to maybe not take a vote and present all of it to the council, or take a vote, but also say we want these issues to be discussed at the council so it gets up here. But the weight of the vote can influence a council decision. I'm not saying it is going to today. I think we all have, we've all looked at all the facts, and we're going to make up our own minds, and I think we're doing a good job, but it can lead to that, especially on issues. So I just want to put that out there. But I think I talked about everything I need to for now, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This conversation feels a little bit fraught, I have to say, and a little bit more fraught than I expected it to leading into this. And for good reason, I think important reason. I think it's important discussion that we're having. So, but I still want to take this opportunity, despite maybe the tone and feeling that we're all feeling right now, to just take a couple minutes to celebrate what's happening here.
because this is such a significant vote that we are taking today. It is truly momentous, I think, as all of our colleagues have said, and it was not a simple matter to get here. It took years of community advocacy and engagement, hundreds and hundreds of hours of research and study from our Community Formation Commission members, countless collaborative workshops between our staff, Santa Barbara Police Department, the CFC members, tons of public input, not just in the last 30 days, but the last year plus 18 months. It really wasn't simple, and it also wasn't a foregone conclusion that we would end up here today taking this vote. I know for a fact that there were many people who looked at this process and said, not only to themselves, but said publicly, this will never end up at a vote. This will never become an ordinance. And I don't think it would have, were it not for your indefatigable commitment to this process. I do want to call out, though, it's not just the hours that you all put in, though there were many of them. It was also your willingness to meaningfully engage with the process, to work through preconceptions and to work through wariness. I think that's a fair word. Wariness both of a system like this and of housing a system like this in the city. I think there was wariness on all sides, but you committed to overcoming that, to put forward something that's going to work, and we're here. And we are creating, with the passage of this ordinance, a framework. No, it's not what everybody wants. It's not everything that everybody wants, is maybe a better way of putting it, but it is the single most significant step toward meaningful civilian oversight in our city's history. That is a big, big deal. It's a big deal. And I guess just for me, with this vote, with what you all have created, I have to say on a personal level, this means something to me. This actually means a whole lot to me, and I think it means a whole lot to a whole lot of you as well. This vote is a direct result of your commitment to the creation of a city that is more just, more equitable, more fair, and safer for all of us. Safer for all of us. So I had to take this opportunity truly to say thank you to the CFC members, to our Santa Barbara Police Department in particular. I thank you for sharing in this commitment, and thank you for acting on it. And I know that it wasn't easy, but it most certainly was worthwhile. And my gratitude and the gratitude of the entire community, I really believe, is with you today. I also want to be very clear that to me, this is just the beginning of the conversation. It is in no way the end of it. I think the presentation was very clear today that there is much work that remains to be done to ensure that the system that we set up is the best that it can possibly be. And I have every confidence that our staff team, as well as really the incredible group of community members who have been so engaged in this process, will continue to lean in and do the work that needs to be done to make this process really a substantive one, and one that works for everyone. I've always believed, and I still believe today, that civilian oversight is fundamentally about increasing transparency and growing trust. Transparency and trust, that is what civilian oversight is all about. Those are two things that can't happen in a vacuum. You don't have transparency and trust just because you pass an ordinance. It is an ongoing, iterative process that requires of us that we be continually engaged in its growth. And I want to say here today that you have my commitment to continuing to grow that transparency and trust, and to be part of that process with all of you civilian, what do we call it, Community Formation Commission members, our police department, the team that will come together to serve this new commission. You have my full support, and I look forward to being part of the growth of this process with all of you. So now that I had the opportunity to say my thank yous, I'll just get to I guess, the issues that are up for debate. I agree. I think Councilmember Snedden said it, unanimity is critical today, and I agree with her wholeheartedly. I think because this effort is so monumental, it's absolutely imperative that we speak with one voice about the importance of it to us as a body and to the entire community. So I, with that, agree with what Councilmember Friedman said. I think that's the approach we should take. I will just speak to the substance of the issues, though, even outside of the unanimity piece. I do think that it makes good sense that we would parallel the charter in this case, and that the nexus to the Civil Service Commission is very clear. But more importantly for me, and I think this is an issue for me that I've really thought a lot about, think the requirements piece. But what we're looking for as part and parcel of this process is meaningful cultural change within our law enforcement to continue on the path toward true 21st century policing. And to me, that requires at least an opportunity that all be able to apply to participate, not to necessarily participate, but to have the opportunity to be considered to be at that table. Trust and transparency, to me, requires equal opportunity to be part of the conversation. And with the board that we have set up, as we've set it up today, I don't see how we could move forward with meaningful trust and transparency if we don't allow the opportunity for all to be considered to be part of that conversation. If we don't have that engagement, I don't see how this process will work. Making sure that we have a process that works, one that we can build on, one that we can begin to create more comprehensive oversight. That is the most important thing to me. And for that reason, I think that it's important that we are as open as we possibly can be in this way. On the ride-along question, I'm really sensitive to, I appreciate Councilmember Gutierrez hearing your experience with ride-alongs, and I have to admit, I have not been on one. And the reason I have not been on one, well, we had COVID, and then when we started offering them again, I was pregnant and then breastfeeding, and that was not an appropriate state for me to be on a ride-along. So for me, when I read the accommodations, I thought, oh, great. That's recognizing that someone maybe in my position as well wouldn't have to go through an immersive experience if there were physical limitations. So, again, I don't have a problem with the revised language, but I do have a problem with the deletion of accommodations, because now to me it seems like there are other challenges we've created with that change. So, what I would like is for us to be as flexible as possible, recognizing that a ride-along is not possible for every member at all times. Maybe in a year, sometime down the line, it would be possible. Maybe it never will be. Whatever language gets us to as much flexibility as possible, recognizing the inherent importance, of course, to that experience, but understanding that not everyone can or should be made to do it is what I'd like. So I guess all that's to say, whatever we end up with is fine. I just think the original version was actually broader and gave more opportunity for individuals to craft a program that worked best for them. So I will, I guess, close by just saying I will support, I'm not sure what version we're even calling it at this point, the staff version with any cleanup changes that need to be made. And when the time comes, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to make the motion.
Okay, Mr. Jordan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You almost brought me out of my cup half-empty funk, but it is kind of sad and bittersweet that we're backing into this on the defensive or on the offensive, whatever side you're on. It should be a celebratory moment, and I think that over the last month, maybe, that's been lost on people that have been involved with this, and the absolute historic component of the step we're taking, where we were versus where we're going to be. So it's unfortunate. My memory struggles as I get older, but I agree with Mr. Friedman that when you come out of a ordinance committee meeting with a vote 2-1 on a recommendation, you are making or sending a pretty strategic statement to council. And I appreciate Councilmember Sneddon's clarification on that today. But I do think it certainly framed it not to be that way when it arrived here. Every time I look down at my sheet, I'm looking at a highlighted paragraph that starts the members and qualifications and disqualifications section that Mark Kramer, fireman Mark Kramer, if you don't know what shirt he's wearing today, almost read the whole thing verbatim, and it pretty much gathers every type of human being and any type of known or unknown characteristic known to man in one paragraph. And then it goes on to offer what should be reasonable exclusions, and there's really just 3. And the first one is a person that's actually representing a criminal, so there's obvious bias there. And the third one is a list of items that are either actually illegal or definitely immoral characteristics or actions of a person. But then the middle one, of course, is it just unilaterally carves out any individual associated with a job in law enforcement or fire prevention. Certainly contrasting everything that you read above that in the here's what we're looking for paragraph or 2. And that's been disconcerting for me right back to the beginning of this. So I'm hearing really good things up and down the line, I think. So I will be supporting the original staff version, not what I'm calling the red line version. I feel that that accomplishes exactly what we've talked about over the last year and a half, exactly what we've been shooting for. I would like to see the perspective and lived experiences and expertise and relationships of, let's just pick on law enforcement because that's the elephant in the room, of former law enforcement represented here. I would welcome their participation and their knowledge, and I think the burden does fall on the 7 people who are at any time are sitting up here to pick that right person, just as it does for a whole bunch of other positions. So that's one of the 2 contentious points. And the other point is, I think the language is sufficiently in there to address any ride-along, whether you want to not do a daytime ride-along or you're a vampire, or whether you not want to do a nighttime ride-along because you just don't like nights. We will make an accommodation for anybody who has a concern in any one of those areas. So it doesn't come down to you only have to do a daytime, or we want you to do a daytime and a nighttime. If you have a problem with any of those, you can request an accommodation, and we'll find an accommodation for you. And I think that gives us, again, the greatest flexibility with the potential highest return on what that person's going to bring to the position by participating. So you're going to beat me. I will, after you make that motion, I will make the second then. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Ms. Gutierrez.
With all due respect, Councilmember Jordan, I do want to second the motion since I was working with Ms. Harmon on this. I'm going to keep it really short. I came today, I'm actually supposed to be working remotely. So if I have a blanket and a sweater, I do not feel good, but I'm here because this agenda item is really important to me. As we sit here, and I've said this over and over, there are still things going on in the community. There is still our community members are divided. There's still not trust in law enforcement, but there's also community members that really want law enforcement in our community. And I do want to thank all the commissioners for all your hard work and the hours and your commitment. I understand what it is to be in a committee and bringing ideas forward and and struggling back and forth. So I really want to acknowledge your work on this, especially because we, as council members, we didn't give you a lot of guidance. So I do take responsibility for that, and you guys did an amazing work. I want to thank city staff for all your work, like always, and for the police department and everybody involved. I do want to say that I'm a little disappointed of how this process went. And I think it was definitely a learning experience for all of us that we really need to think through when issues arise, to think about the unintentional consequences. As leaders, our decisions make a huge difference in our communities. Once a decision is taken on Tuesday, you see the aftermath hours after. I am going to be supporting the original version of the staff recommendation. I do believe that it is important to go on a ride-along, but as somebody that, yes, I have friends and family in law enforcement, but I've also had experience with law enforcement that hasn't been the best. So I highly recommend that, there's accommodations. I still feel that those that are going to be serving in this commission, they have to go through some sort of, either they go to the police department and they're shadowing a police officer, but going on the ride-along, like all my colleagues have mentioned, it is life-changing. And I think for any profession that's going to be having an oversight committee, looking after them or judging them, I think it's out of respect that you kind of put yourself in those law enforcement shoes. I want to thank our police officers. Since I started being a council member, the first department that I went to go visit was the police department. And the first conversation that I had with the chief at the time was, how can I help you create a better communication between those that live in my district and the police department? I want those people that live in my district to have the same open door access that I feel that I have. How can we do that? And she was very open to it. And from the time that I've been on council, I can tell you that I've been very vocal about the things that should be changed in the police department. I've had meetings. I remember when I started to see a lot of new faces and a lot of new police officers, and I would wave at them and they wouldn't wave back. And so I did have a couple meetings with police officers, and I said, why are your new police officers not very friendly? And they explained to me they're just coming out of the academy. They don't have that training. They're on guard all the time. And so after that conversation, every police officer now that comes out of the academy has to go through a community academy where they learn about our community and the different leaders and the history of the community. So it helps them understand this community a little bit better. So this is definitely a learning lesson, but I think it's a win-win for all of us. And I want to thank, again, the commissioners for all your hard work. I know it was very stressful, but I just hope that we all learn from this. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to apologize for my tone earlier. Obviously, I'm pretty passionate about this. The last time I got this passionate was when I was defending a new police station. So as you can see, I am very passionate about supporting our police, but also holding you all accountable. And reading my colleagues after their comments, and unity has been brought up, I will also be voting in support of staff recommendation, and just reiterate that we have to do our due diligence to make sure that we're being as objective and equitable when it comes to appointing these individuals to these commissions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys. I too want to recognize, obviously, the efforts of the CFC and all the many hours and meetings you went to, but I really want to recognize also the administration, the flexibility, the creativity, the things the administration did under Ms. Bjork to to create the position, Ms. Anderson, to do the things that it took to facilitate this whole process. And one of the things that we did was we created this amazing, to me, almost, well, it was out of the bounds of a normal public process with this ordinance. We don't normally put it out for, was month to, I think, 5 weeks for public comment. So, yeah, I was a little touchy about the fact that the red lines came in when they did because I hadn't seen them until the ordinance committee. Now, that's neither here nor there, but I'm saying the public had a very robust ability to get at the language of this ordinance. I was off council when this whole process started, and I guess because public safety is our #1 priority, and I certainly take that part of my job seriously. But I guess when I saw the generalization of policing versus the department we have here in Santa Barbara, which I think is a model of community policing, I know a lot of the folks that are behind the badges. It's kind of what brought me back out of retirement, back up to here, because I really was concerned about this. This process is coming to a good end, and I appreciate that on all levels from all sides. There was a lot of bumps along the road and a lot of what I think were unnecessary directions we went from time to time, but we're here. And what I'd really like to see is a unanimous vote from this council. I don't control anybody's vote up here, but I think it's important for not only the support of our public safety people, but for the process we went through, because I do not want to chill the next opportunity for a public process to be as robust as this one is. And if we can't back this as a team, I don't know how we go forward and do this all over again. So with that, I would entertain a motion, unless Ms. Sneddon, do you have another comment you want to make, or should we go to motion? Ms. Sneddon.
Just very, very quickly, I do want to say that we would not have gotten to the point of hearing the comment from each council member on those two particular contentious points had it not come forward the way that it did. And the ordinance committee meeting was scheduled for 1 hour. I didn't have the benefit at that time of Mr. Jordan's comments. Those are the first time I heard his perspective. Genuinely do not know each other's perspective until we bring it out into the public for public discussion. And then hearing from colleagues, and I have to say I'm particularly swayed by Mark Kramer's comments in particular, but because of this process, because of hearing from all of our colleagues and the public in one room, in one space, brings us to this point. So I still think it was beneficial moving forward that we discussed it fully, openly, and publicly, so that as we move forward, we know that that's been fully vetted.
Okay, and with that, and hoping in the spirit that we don't have to hear about process anymore in this particular conversation, I will entertain a motion. Ms. Harmon, your light is on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Point of clarification to staff, do I need to make any specification in my motion as to which draft, or if I, how should
Yes, Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Harmon, the original presented ordinance to Ordinance Committee is attachment 2. So referencing that specific attachment in your motion, I believe is the most helpful to City Clerk.
So it is attachment 2? Okay, perfect, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move that we, let's see, how do I even put that? Move that we adopt staff recommendation to amend the municipal code by adding the ordinance as reflected in attachment 2 of the council agenda report to assign additional civilian police oversight duties to the Board of Fire and Police Commissioners.
Okay, motion by Harmon, second by,
And, thank you, and that we authorize and direct the city clerk's office to accept applications through Thursday, November 10th, 2022 at 5 p.m. for the special recruitment of 5 members to the Fire and Police Commission.
thank you. And is there a second?
I second.
Second by Gutierrez. All right, very good. I will then, can we go to a, is there a discussion on the motion? Or are you just, okay. May we have a roll call vote then, please?
Yes, and this is the motion as just described by Mayor Pro Tem Harmon. It was motioned by Mayor Pro Tem Harmon, seconded by Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez. Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye, thank you. It passes unanimously, as it should. Very good. We are going to take a break for the translators, and we will be back at 4:30. And this is an announcement, Ms. Alejandra Gutierrez is going to be participating remotely for the remainder of the meeting. Madam Clerk, you have an item to read.
Item 14, agreements for fiscal year 2023 with People Assisting the Homeless, $202,100, and Santa Barbara Alliance for Community Transformation, $200,000 agreements.
All right, very good. And Ms. Stotts, are you making the presentation?
I am, Mayor Rouse.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Elizabeth Stotts. I am the Homelessness Programs Analyst for the City of Santa Barbara. I'll be doing the presentation today on the item before you. Ms. Anderson is here to answer questions with me at the end of the presentation. So let me provide you a little bit of background on what we're doing today. Each year, the city provides funding to PATH and SB Act for support of general operations. And the purpose of today's presentation is to renew those agreements for fiscal year 23 and to also discuss some of the proposed changes to some of those agreements. So first we'll start with PATH's agreement. A little bit of background about PATH. PATH operates an interim housing program for persons experiencing homelessness. PATH provides not just interim housing and basic necessities, but those include meals, access to showers, and restrooms. Beyond basic needs resources, PATH residents also have access to case management and on-site resources such as physical and behavioral health care, substance use counseling, housing location and assistance, veteran services, and employment and benefit assistance. Each year since 1999, PATH has received financial support from the city to help with shelter operations. That amount has been $202,100 each year since fiscal year 2015. The purpose of those funds has been to provide general operating support. This year, for the first time, PATH and city staff have negotiated fiscal year 23 agreement to use the city funding to reserve up to 7 beds for persons specifically referred by the city's contracted street outreach service providers such as CityNet and city staff, including the Santa Barbara Police Department. PATH has similar agreements with Santa Barbara County Department of Behavioral Wellness, Cottage Populations Health, the Medical Recuperative Care Program, and the City of Goleta. Another proposed change for the fiscal year 23 agreement is to incorporate certain provisions of PATH CUP to their agreement, specifically the requirements for neighborhood communication and outreach and neighborhood watch patrol. The agreement will require PATH to submit quarterly reports to staff documenting compliance with these specific provisions of the CUP prior to quarterly disbursement of funds. Staff will also continue to facilitate PATH's biannual presentations before the Planning Commission to report on compliance with their CUP. Codifying these CUP provisions in grant agreements will help ensure continuity of agreements and expectations in the event of staff turnover. PATH has recently made great strides that I'm happy to share. After nearly a year-long surge, an outreach worker began working at PATH last month. This staff person is tasked with engaging individuals who are not shelter residents but spend time in the surrounding neighborhood. In collaboration with SB Act, CityNet, and Good Samaritan, an outreach schedule has been developed that will provide consistent street outreach in the East Side neighborhood and areas immediately around PATH and the Rescue Mission, and also in areas along the waterfront such as Chase Palm Park and Dwight Murphy, and in the North Milpas area around the Franklin Neighborhood Clinic. PATH will provide the bulk of the outreach coverage Monday through Friday, which will be augmented by CityNet and Good Samaritan on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Next, I'll go over SB Act. So SB Act provides administrative oversight and coordination of the Act on Homelessness Collaborative in Santa Barbara. Beginning in fiscal year 2020, in partnership with Santa Barbara Foundation, Council allocated funding to SB Act to develop a unified strategic response to address homelessness and its impacts. As part of its role, SB Act leads smaller groups of housing agencies, service providers, and individuals with lived experience to increase coordination and collaboration. Additionally, SB Act coordinates neighborhood-centered groups known as regional action plans RAPs, as more commonly referred to, that focus on neighborhoods where homeless numbers are highest or where localized issues need to be addressed. SB Act has facilitated the development of a common agenda, strategic plan to address homelessness and impacts in the city of Santa Barbara to be completed at the end of 2023. At its April 19, 2022 meeting, Council received an update from SB Act on the status of the strategic plan. SB Act also operates 3 neighborhood navigation centers, whereby service organizations gather weekly to provide services in a one-stop-shop location. Services include case management, food distribution, medical and veterinary care, sanitation services, and more. These NNCs are a vital resource that not only ensure persons experiencing homelessness receive basic care, but it also helps service providers easily locate individuals that are sometimes hard to find on the street. NNCs operate Tuesdays at the Carrillo Commuter Lot, Wednesdays at the Rescue Mission, and Thursdays at Alameda Park. This coming year, with funding from the city and private foundations, SB Act will continue its coordination of the Homelessness Collaborative. This includes facilitation of the steering committee and execution of the Common Agenda strategic plan. SB Act will also continue to operate NNCs. As part of continued operations, staff is working with SB Act to identify best practices and coordination approaches for service delivery. This includes vetting suitable alternative locations to Alameda Park, as well as eventually looking at alternate locations for the Commuter Lot Neighborhood Navigation Center for when the construction of affordable housing begins at that location. To that effect, we are obtaining feedback from service partners as well as person receiving neighborhood navigation services to identify requirements for an ideal NNC location. SB Act will also continue to facilitate the regional action plans with a return focus to prioritizing outreach and service coordination to address individuals in need, especially where there are a number of individuals at particular locations in a neighborhood. With the County of Santa Barbara now facilitating regular collaborative work groups with service providers specific to street outreach, encampment response, housing, and homelessness prevention, SB Act and city staff have developed new initiatives for fiscal year 2023. SB Act will shift from hosting their own homelessness prevention, housing, and shelter housing retention work groups to co-facilitating the county-led work group meetings. Additionally, SB Act will develop a new behavioral health working group that will engage mental health providers who have not traditionally been included in collaborative conversations regarding people experiencing homelessness. This work group will include treatment centers, crisis response volunteers, and advocacy groups. The goal of this work group will be to develop strategies to address the increased mental health and substance use needs of persons experiencing homelessness. This working group will also serve as a venue to provide trainings to service providers on mental health best practices such as crisis de-escalation and trauma-informed care. And finally, recognizing that homelessness is not isolated to a single community, SB Act will create a monthly South County Collaboration Regional Action Plan to address homelessness and its impacts on a regional basis. These meetings will connect staff from Carpinteria, Montecito, Santa Barbara, and Goleta to share updates on city-level efforts, discuss shared concerns, identify priority individuals in need, and coordinate city-level strategies. The table above on the slide shows the breakdown of the agreements and their funding source. PATH's fiscal year 2023 agreement will be funded from the Affordable Housing Fund. The SB Act Collaborative Agreement will be funded with fiscal year 23 general funds, and the Neighborhood Navigation Centers will be funded with fiscal year 23 permanent local housing allocation funds. There are sufficient expenditure appropriations available in the Community Development fiscal year 2023 budget to cover the recommended funding agreements. Before I conclude my presentation, I'll review staff's recommendations. We ask Council to authorize the Community Development Director to negotiate and execute, subject to approval as to form by the City Attorney, a funding agreement in the amount of $202,100 with People Assisting the Homeless for the operation of a homeless shelter and related services. We ask Council to authorize the Community Development Director to execute a funding agreement in the amount of $100,000 with the Santa Barbara Alliance for Community Transformation to facilitate a community collaborative on homelessness. And we ask Council to authorize the Community Development Director to execute a funding agreement in the amount of $100,000 with the Santa Barbara Alliance for Community Transformation to operate neighborhood navigation centers. And that concludes my presentation. We're here to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stotts. With that, we'll go to questions from council. Start with Mr. Friedman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions. Appreciate the report. So with PATH, there's been a lot of neighborhood issues there. So how is this structured a little differently to get a little more oversight and accountability than years in the past, so that if we feel they're in compliance or not, that we're able to have that discussion with them? Compliance with the CUP, I should reference, conditional use permit.
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, the CUP has specific conditions that it lays out that PATH is required to engage business owners, to provide outreach, and to provide neighborhood watch. So we are specifically incorporating those provisions of the CUP. We will be negotiating with PATH as to how exactly how that information is reported to us in terms of number of clients outreached, number of visits done. We're also looking for feedback as to what that would look like from council.
So this would give us more enforcement tools if we feel they're underperforming?
Exactly. So payments are dispersed on a quarterly basis, so we would be looking at their quarterly report and looking at those specific measures.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, I just wanted to add this is the first time the grant agreement with PATH will be transitioning from general operating support to specific bed allocation, as well as the first time we've included CUP requirements in the grant agreement. So we've attached monetary incentives essentially for them to comply with the CUP.
That's a big shift, and I appreciate you bringing that. But you kind of teed up my second question, Ms. Anderson. So now we have the 7 beds. So how would those help us in the city in terms of our response to homelessness versus what we have now?
Having dedicated beds will help our, not just, mostly CityNet, but also our police department. If they have somebody that needs to be put in a bed, they will have a specific access to those 7 beds. So in the event that PATH is full, they have those 7 beds. And Barbara can speak to, Ms. Anderson can speak to how that helps the police department.
Absolutely. So this, again, is the first time we'll have 7 beds dedicated full-time, no matter if we use them or not. So the agreements with the police department have been by use, and we essentially pay for them when they're utilized. So this gives us more enforcement options 24/7 because we have those beds consistently available.
And currently, if they were full, we wouldn't have those. So now we're always going to have those 7, regardless of whether they're full.
Exactly.
That's great. I'm supportive of that. Just a couple more questions. One on PATH, and then so in the staff report, it mentioned that there's 60 clients or so that are receiving services, case management, and everything, but they have 350 unduplicated. Is there any language on performance metrics on that? Because that's a pretty low percentage of 60 out of 350, and the goal is to try to get people to accept services. And so is there anything to try to increase that number of unduplicated clients who are willing to accept services?
Mayor Rouse, Councilmember Friedman, I would defer to PATH to answer that question, but I would say that those are the overall measures they put for their overall programs, particularly when they submitted their CDBG application. The clientele that is at PATH has severe trauma and lots of needs. The 60 that are meeting those objectives are based on people that have individualized service plans. Not every client that goes into PATH chooses to go into, to develop it. It's called an ISP, Individual Service Plan. So it's not 60 of the 350, it's of those that have individualized service plans.
Okay, so I'll follow up with them when I get that, but I just wanted to see if a little clarification. My last question, this is in regards, because it comes up quite frequently, and this might be an SB Act question, but is the regional navigation centers that are done, and the one at Alameda Park in particular, has there, and I understand the reasoning why and what would happen before, but is there any discussion on alternate locations for that? And if so, is that something that we can look at more seriously?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman, we are in process, not only in stepping back and looking at the characteristics of neighborhood navigation centers after a year and a half of being implemented, of what not only offers the best environment to deliver services, but best reaches the target population we're trying to serve, knowing that the commuter lot is not an indefinite location, as well as the impacts that the neighborhood is experiencing in Alameda Park. So one, we've done the survey of both NNC recipients in terms of services, as well as provider partners in terms of those characteristics, as well as did our first kind of walk along the neighborhood of Alameda Park to identify potential possible alternate sites, both the pros and cons of each of those sites. So we actually have our first matrix developed on those locations, and now SBACT and the city will work together in initiating communications with those potential property owners, parking lot owners, as well as faith-based organizations that we've identified. So we are in process on vetting those alternate sites.
Great, thank you. I know it's still a work in progress, but I know that comes up, so just want to be able to report if the public asks us. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think a couple of these you've asked, but I really want to be clear. The 7 beds that we'll have available to us, you're calling them up to. We do have 7 beds, whether we use them or not, right?
That is correct,
Yep. Okay.
Council Member.
And then, so I'll just, I don't really know how to phrase this, but the goal, in my mind, along with everything else we're doing, is also to begin to make some accomplishments with poor behavior on the streets. And one of the things that has restricted us from doing that is the Boise decision, right? And so having those beds clearly gives us the legal standing to begin to remedy some of the bad behavior on the streets or the staying on the streets as long as we have one of those beds?
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, nothing limits us in the Boise decision to enforce illegal activity on the streets of Santa Barbara in regards to drug use, as well as other substance abuses, as well as public intoxication and other, I would say, illegal behavior. So that's the first point I'd like to make. The second is we've always had the ability to help and support individuals that accepted services as well as accepted referrals to shelter beds if a shelter bed was available at any time, whether we prepaid for those beds or not. So law enforcement has been facilitating, again, support for individuals as it's accepted, to PATH, Rescue Mission, as well as other alternate locations. But yes, we are putting in additional strategies and I would say tools for our police department as well as other providers to have beds available at any time. And so we actually have been in conversation with the police department that this would still be in addition to their agreement, which would be a by-use agreement. But it does come down to the availability of those shelter beds outside of the 7 that we've procured.
So help me again with
Yeah.
the Boise thing then.
Yeah.
So 3 things. One, we're enforcing illegal behavior. The second one is we're talking to people, and if they want to get off the street, we're serving that. The Boise affects somebody who doesn't want to get off the street and is doing what, and this accomplishes our legal ability to move that person along.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, Boise decision is specific to illegal camping.
Okay.
So it is how tough do we want to be in enforcing legal camping in parks that it's illegal overnight. We have sit-lie ordinance that allows us to enforce more illegal camping in certain areas of the city. But in general, our police department leans to giving a warning that illegal camping isn't allowed, and 2, that we're giving them every opportunity to pursue and seek out and give them transportation to a shelter location if they're open to that. And the third is that we will keep warning before citation. And so I understand, again, some of the concerns and questions we've got from the public as well as council. Illegal camping is a different level of enforcement than illegal drug use, substance abuse, as well as public intoxication. We do treat those a little bit differently, not just because of Boise decision, but because individuals are struggling in our community, they need our support, and being able to sleep overnight because a shelter bed isn't available, we need to be able to support them in that and facilitate the connection to services when they're open to receiving them.
Totally in with that, and I'm sorry to belabor this, but the ability of having the beds open give us the opportunity not to be restricted by the Boise decision, if we so choose. Because I'm under the impression that that has been one of the considerations or excuses on not taking action in certain situations because we're subject to the Boise decision.
Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Friedman.
Jordan.
Sorry,
That's okay.
Councilmember Jordan, thank you. It's been a long afternoon. Yes, it does.
Okay.
And I don't, but I really do want to make it not specific to Boise or illegal camping. It just gives us an opportunity if someone is maybe having problematic behavior that doesn't speak to other illegal activities, that yes, we can encourage them to seek shelter, we can offer them the shelter bed opportunity, and ask them to leave the location they're currently at.
So we should talk about that because I really do want to. So while doing everything else we do, because that again, it's like one of the top complaints running around every day. And then if that's the case, or not the case, how is the open bed status going to be communicated in real time to our partners out in the field or to our police department? So it's 7 o'clock at night and either one of our SBAC partners are out there working on somebody and they say, yeah, okay, I won't stay in this doorstep, I'll go to a shelter, or it's an enforcement situation where somebody's camping and the police want to move that person along and the person won't go, but then the police want the ability to just move the person along. And how will they know then that there's an available bed and we'll have that legal backup?
Yeah, Mayor Rouse and Councilmember Jordan, that is available as quickly as we can communicate the decision from council today. And so we will
No, I
communicate
really
it.
meant from the field to path and back. That's
Yeah.
what I mean,
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
right?
Councilmember Jordan, so CityNet, the contract is primarily geared for CityNet to be able to put, since they're our primary outreach providers. CityNet does a daily check-in of bed availability.
Okay.
So that is something that's already in place. Our police department also has regular communications, so they've already been having a relationship with PATH in terms of getting the bed count. So they already have that mechanism in progress.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, very good. Couple quick questions, Ms. Stotts. I think you and I were talking about before this, the CUP that the PATH functions under allows for but does not require the existence of a winter shelter. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor Rouse.
Okay, because to me that was, I think, an essential facility in the past that we were able to utilize in terms of inclement weather or, you know, situation like we have with where we used the Rose Motel instead because we didn't have that. So it'd be interesting to know what the circumstances would have to be for us to proceed back to getting that kind of a emergency backup. And I'm not pretending to try to go there tonight, but that would be a good thing. And of course, the neighborhood patrol or the environs around PATH is, as we know from when we walked on the east side, is a really critical and very sensitive thing to prioritize. And then you've already mentioned the Alameda Park alternatives, which is fabulous. You know, that's important. Within this, we're strictly talking about our city budgets and whatnot. Do you have off the top of your head the county participation in the PATH funding of the projects that they do over there? And if you don't, that's fine.
Mayor Rouse, I believe Mr. Castillo from PATH would be able to, might have that information more readily available than I. It's significant.
Okay, very good. With that, I would go to public comment with Rich Snyder. Sander. I say Snyder. Sander. Never do that without your glasses on.
Hi, Mayor Rouse and City Council members. I want to begin by thanking you for your investment in both the neighborhood navigation centers as well as coordination for the Act on Homelessness Collaborative over these past years. Today, city staff is recommending you continue your investment as we enter the third year of our strategic plan. This year, we hope to expand our partnerships from Goleta to Carpinteria, as well as work in tandem with the county to delineate roles and responsibilities. Due to the requests and needs brought before us by the city and service providers, new this year, we are creating a behavioral health working group that will focus and align current efforts and best practices around mental health response and care for people on the streets. I'm really proud to say that over these past 2 years, SB Act has matched the public dollars that you have put forward with private foundation matches. We have received funding from the Santa Barbara Foundation, the Hutton Parker Foundation, the Ann Jackson Family Foundation, the Natalie Orfila Foundation, and just this year, the Women's Fund, who is contributing to the NNCs. This has happened dollar for dollar, year after year. This public-private match has been integral to our work, and it allows us to act as a neutral party, aligning other nonprofits with city and county strategies. We have asked some of our partners to write in their support to you, and you should have those already through email. I'll be here to answer any questions you may have, but with that, I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sander. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody online that wants to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have Natasha Todorovic and Natalia Gavani. Natasha Todorovic, please go ahead.
This is about accountability. SB Act is getting $100,000, and part of that is to run the RAP meetings. These were to be weekly meetings, and this spring, they cut those by half. Did the public get half their money back? Now, you might recall my email from last month with Jeff Schaefer and Kyla Peterson leaving SB Act. The task of facilitating our RAP calls went to Catherine Soto Vasquez, who was formerly from PATH. And the calls were supposed to keep PATH accountable to the public in the city. They're supposed to replace MATAF, and they're supposed to be neutral. Instead, what we have heard is advocacy for harm reduction. They're not doing the neutral piece. They're not doing the accountability piece. Further, these calls need a skilled facilitator who can handle hard discussions. So what are we getting for $100,000? And $200,000 for PATH, week after week, month after month, year in, year out, we have been struggling to get PATH to be accountable, at minimum for their good neighbor responsibility, which is a criteria of their CUP. And they want you to give them a pass on it because they're doing good. Their harm reduction model is already getting them state funding. Do they really need our funding? It's good because, well, harm is reduced, right? This model is ideological. It's idealistic. It's belief-driven. It's unproven. They are willfully blind to the harms it's doing in our community. And what you're getting is a sanitized representation of the situation. Currently, it's traumatizing to kids. It's shaping the next generation. It's normalizing illegal and deviant behavior. It's shaming the public into acceptance of the lowest common denominator that even homeless are refusing to accept beds at PATH. It's increasing criminality and overdoses. It's costing businesses their livelihood and their staff. It's lowering addicts' definition of rock bottom. Now, even multiple deaths and returns with Narcan don't dissuade the addicts. And it is costing our city in policing, in healthcare, and in services. Please ask them, what are we paying for? Who is measuring and ensuring performance? Where is the proof that it works? The public should not be funding a modern-day opium den. This is public funding for a shelter. And PATH has moved far, far away from that.
You need to wrap up,
Please
please.
stop feeding the beast.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Natalia Gavani. Natalia Gavani, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. Here we are again with PATH pleading for public funding to aid the homeless population. No compassionate person can deny the need. However, there are questionable practices. Why are PATH residents continually using drugs, drugged out, and disposing of their used needles on public streets? PATH insists on a harm reduction policy, which sounds good. But why do so many harms come with it? Shouldn't we fully understand this policy and the model they use before funding them? This city has continually given this shelter millions without holding them responsible for results. Instead of continually acting as an ATM for PATH, I ask you to exercise your power today to question where the money is going. Why do they continually ignore the good neighbor policy, a requirement in their CUP? They have been given carte blanche by this city year after year without performance requirements, and things continue to get worse. What is it going to take for this city to stop enabling them and start holding them accountable for their harm increasing actions? Please deny their funding today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other speakers online?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. Quick question for Ms. Stotts. The funding for PATH that's mentioned on the action item, is that an annual or a semi-annual number? Is that the annual budget from us?
The 202,000
Yes.
is an annual grant paid in quarterly disbursements.
Okay, very good. The only reason why I ask is I remember back when we used to have a budget that we decided we'd go 6 months in order to have a report back on progress. That was quite a while back, so I don't know. I'm just going to throw that out there because I know there's a lot of transitions going on, but it seems like
Mayor Rouse, it's done quarterly.
it's distributed quarterly?
The funds are distributed quarterly upon submittal of a performance report.
Okay, and who gets the performance
I
report?
do.
We do? Okay, very good. Okay, with that, we will go to council, and I believe it's Mr. Friedman and then Mr. Jordan. Jordan first, okay. Very gentlemanly of you, Mr. Friedman. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of the two actions, I'm totally in agreement with SB Act. I've been pretty close to them and think that what they're doing is nimble, effective, needed. I just think they run a really good operation. I'm less engaged and familiar with the current version of PATH, and so I guess my worry. So I'll just tell you, we spend a lot of time on services and programs for people who are willing, and money, tons of it. It's the technical term, right? Tons of it. But and it's I don't think I'm telling anybody's secret that there's still community members who are very, very, very frustrated with how they are impacted out there on the street. And historically, at least for the past several years, one of the easy answers has been to say we legally can't do anything because we don't have any beds. And so while I appreciate your framing the available beds thing, which I agree with, I think I've been to enough of these meetings, I've walked this walk already, I agree with, but I'm not really interested in spending $200,000 a year for 2,500 bed nights for people who don't want to go to a bed. I could be talking about spending $200,000 a year to if enforcement is the wrong word, get some control back on the street in situations where the Boise decision is hampering our ability to lessen the impact on the community. I'm game for that. If the first one happens because of that, I'm game for that too. But I'm definitely game for trying to solve this supposed quandary we've had since that decision that if you're camping, we can't do anything unless we have an alternative for you. So if we have an alternative for you, I'd like to see less camping where it's impacting the community. So if that's what this means, I would be okay with it. It's $80 a night. It's not too bad for 2,500 bed nights. So it's cheaper than a couple other decisions we've made. But I think it'd be great. The CUP is a difficult issue. I've been part of 2 CUP reopenings while associated with the city. I think they were both with Casa Esperanza, not PATH. And I know it's, even when you can successfully, as a community, reopen that discussion, it's perilous litigation waters to revoke a CUP, so you end up kind of going through the process and then telling everybody there's a good amount of compliance while you give out a list of things that they have to do better at complying with. So it kind of is a little contradictory. So I appreciate the linking of our funds to behavior, to performance. I think that again would be a key point of the beds are always there. There's great communication back and forth to our partners and our law enforcement people on that at whatever time of the day or at the start of the day there are beds available so people can take the appropriate action, and in the case of law enforcement, action that is legally protected rather than puts us in a liability situation. And then I think the devil's always in the details and the performance. I'd also like to make the suggestion that the CUP compliance and report out on the CUP compliance and report out on the bed usage come back to the ad hoc subcommittee. Just doesn't have to come back to full council. It can just mix in with the ad hoc subcommittee. I think we're still on track to spend 2.5 more months before we're ready to come back to council. So that could just come back in the mix for us to throw in with all the other zillion ideas and challenges we have. So, so I'm definitely supportive with SB Act. Those are my thoughts on the PATH part of it and how I will be supportive. I don't really suspect there's anything there that is non-supportable with everybody else. So I think I'm saying I'm kind of supportable with both of them, given those. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll start with SB Act. I appreciate all the work that they've done in terms of just the coordination, and it's always evolving, and it needs to, just because the issue's so complex and the needs are changing. And the public-private partnerships, I'm a big fan of those in many ways, and that aligns a lot of the resources that the private philanthropy and others are able to bring in, so they know what we're doing. So it just maximizes our ability to try to get the issues, because they might not even be focusing on that issue or focusing somewhere that's duplicative. So I think it's important to continue with that, and I'm pleased that there are some discussions on looking at the neighborhood navigation centers and addressing the Alameda Park issue and working with the neighborhood there to try to find a place that works for everybody, for those clients being served as well as the neighborhood and the park users on that. In terms of PATH, I appreciate that we're going to have more accountability, the CUP language in there where it hasn't been in the past, the quarterly reports that come to you, and then that the funding wouldn't be released if there's an opportunity to look at it and then hold them accountable for impacts they're having in the neighborhood and others. And supportive, back to SBI, supportive of the move to mental health and alcohol, drug too, so I think that's important. There are some concerns, Councilmember Jordan mentioned it, and the speakers today, just about the neighborhood impacts, drug use that are occurring. And I think right now, to go in a different direction, we would lose those beds, and there could be even additional consequences if PATH wasn't to continue to operate in our ability to have beds, because it's not like we just have 7. There are other beds there that we have access to day in and day out. So if for some reason we didn't fund it and PATH wasn't able to operate, we would lose not only those 7, but additionals, which would hamper our ability to get people off the streets or do enforcement. But I do think there is an opportunity. I'm glad you mentioned putting on the ad hoc that myself and Councilmember Jordan and Councilmember Sneddon are on to get the first report, so we can look at it comprehensively and how what we bring to council as our report. PATH is a strategic partner, and we need to look at them as how we can improve the outcomes there for the clients, the outcomes for the neighborhood. And having this information, and this is the first year we'd be trying this CUP accountability, I'll call it, will help inform us so that when we have these discussions next year, and again, we can look at the types of resources and funding, and we can make adjustments at the next year. So at this point, I am prepared to move the staff recommendation when the time is right on it. And definitely appreciate where Councilmember Jordan was going, but I don't think now is the time to switch that, because I think there would be a lot of unintentional consequences on our ability to enforce what we can right now.
Okay, very good. Well, obviously, there's a lot of focus on PATH, as that's the facility, and I was around the Casa Esperanza days and whatnot, so I know it's always been a problem, but it is something that we need to retain our focus on and retain accountability with, because there is a neighborhood that's impacted. I will say that I've had the privilege of doing some time with SB ACT and walking around, and Ms. Anderson's been with me as well, Ms. Stotts. And I think I've seen distinct improvements, especially in our downtown environs. Part of that may be with the Dignity Moves project as well. But I think we're on a positive trajectory. So I'm pleased and encouraged by what's going on so far. And if we can incorporate that trajectory with PATH as well, and whatever they need, they should be communicating with us in a very regular and very intimate way, I think. I think that's really important that we have an open channel of communication. So with that, with no further comments, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Friedman. Second by Jordan. Does everybody understand the motion? Even the clerk?
Do we need to put in the motion to report out to the ad hoc committee, or just a direction to staff?
I think that's a
Just
staff
direction to
thing,
staff?
wouldn't it be?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Stoss has got that. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay.
May we have a roll call vote? We did not hear from Ms. Gutierrez. She did not have a comment? Okay. Very good.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. And this is a motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Councilmember Jordan for the staff recommendation. Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harmon.
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan.
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Yes?
Councilmember Friedman.
Yes.
And Mayor Rouse.
Aye. Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you to SB ACT and PATH for participating. With that, we will go to council communications. Anybody got anything to report out?
I do.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you. Last week I attended the Castillo Street Undercrossing Improvement Meeting. So city staff is looking into changing the Castillo Undercrossing to make it safer for pedestrians. And it was a really well put together meeting. My compliments to city staff. And it was recorded, so if you all want to get caught up on that, you can look it up on YouTube. I attended the library event for the book of the year. It's called the 5th Season, and they were handing out free books. It was a pretty cool event. I also attended the Ukraine event at a Ukraine supporting event at the Granada, put on by the UCSB Arts and Lectures, and Mayor Rouse spoke at that. It was a pretty good show. It was really interesting music. I attended the South Coast Chambers Legislative Summit held by the South Coast Chamber of Commerce, and yeah, it was some really good stuff that was spoken about there. Let's see, I attended the UCSB Alumni Awards honoring Linda from the creator of lynda.com. She's an honorary graduate of UCSB now. And then also, I forgot her name, but she won an Oscar for Encanto. So it was cool to be able to see a lot of other alumni doing well. Briefly attended the Women's March protesting what's going on in Iran. Attended the SB Housing Day. So many great services that our community provides for housing, but obviously we need much more. Attended the Stearns Wharf 150th anniversary. Mike Jordan was there, and Mayor Rouse spoke, and it was really well attended and really fun. I also spoke honoring Dr. Stephen Eisenstadt, the founder of the Pacifica Graduate Institute. He was retiring, so I spoke on behalf of the city, and it was really interesting. He provides a course in dream tending, so if you all are interested, hit him up. So let's see. Then I attended the Unite the Light community show. Just a great nonprofit, and the event was held at the Community Arts Workshop. Attended the Weihai Sister Cities Dim Sum gathering and spoke about our relationship with China, our sister city, and how that's changed and changing and what we can expect in the future. And then also attended the Library Reading Ambassador graduation at Harding School with Councilmember Friedman, Jordan, Alejandra, Mayor Rouse, who everyone thought was Joe Biden for some reason. So that was really funny. And yeah, it was held at my my old grade school at Harding School, so that was fun. And that's my report out.
All right, Ms. Ned.
Thank you, Mayor Rouse. I attended Housing Authority, or Housing Santa Barbara Day, which was a really well-attended event. Women's March, the 150th celebration of Stearns Wharf, which so many fun events that day. The Chamber Legislative meeting, and Saturday night was Santa Barbara High School homecoming.
All right, very good. And with that, I forget what I even did. So, what's that? Well, yes, we will. We will adjourn in the honor of the Indigenous People holiday, which was actually yesterday. So, very good. And we'll see you guys next time around.